Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the weekly Lawrence City Commission meeting. Do you want to welcome everybody back, as we have been off for a couple of weeks, at least the City Commission part has. Do you want to make people aware it does sound like we're going to have a little bit of weather moving in, something that we haven't seen for quite a few months in Lawrence, Kansas, so I would advise everybody to, if we do get snow, as some have predicted, or we get some precipitation as cold as it is, I would suggest everybody drive and walk carefully in around town so nobody gets hurt. I would ask you to check on your neighbors because it is to get extremely cold. I think it's just a good thing that we all do. So the first item on the agenda tonight is the consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are to be considered under one motion, will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. There is a couple items, items 6D and E, which deal with golf carts and vehicles, utility vehicles have been deferred until next week's meeting. And also item 7A, there is a typo, and it's ordinance number 9316 and authorizing the issuance of up to $3.6 million in industrial revenue bonds and authorize the mayor to execute the necessary bond documents for 826 Pennsylvania Street. Rather than $3.6 million, it is to be $3.2 million. So apologize to everyone for that item. So are there any items on the consent agenda that a member of the commission would like to have removed for separate consideration?
Yeah, item 16.
16. Okay. Any other items a member of the commission would like to have removed? For voting record only, I would like to have item 8 and items A through G that we'll consider under probably one motion, but just for voting purposes only. Is there any item on the consent agenda that a member of the public would like to have removed for separate consideration? Any items? Okay, so then, with the exception of item 8, A through G, and item number 16, items A through G deal with the ORIA design guidelines, and item number 16 is to receive the report regarding outstanding property taxes, special assessments due from Eastside Acquisitions, LLC, regarding an industrial parcel located at 2460. So we need to add to the consent agenda the claims, and it's to 438 vendors and includes all the payroll-related items. And it's in the amount of $10,243,013.19. So with the exception of item A through 8, items A through G, and item number 16 and the addition of claims, I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion made and second to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item 8, A through G, and item number 16 and the addition of claims, made by Commissioner Herbert, second by Commissioner Larsen. Any other questions or comments? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. Item number 8, again, items A through G, which are ordinance number 9211, 9212, 9213, 9214, 9215, and 9216 and 9217. Again, deal with the ORIA design guidelines, and there is a whole lot of reading there to do that I'm not going to read at this time, but I voted against a couple weeks ago and plan to stay with my vote there. So any questions or comments on that? Any public comment on that item, those items? Okay, hearing none, back to the commission then. If there's no questions, I would entertain a motion one way or another then.
I'll move that we approve items A through G.
Okay?
Second.
Motion made and second to approve items 8, number 8 on the consent agenda, items A through G, made by Vice Mayor Soden, second by Commissioner Herbert. Any questions or comments? All in favor of that motion, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 4-1. Mayor Amick's in opposition. And again, item number 16 is to receive the report regarding the outstanding property taxes at 2460 Fairfield Street. Commissioner Larson, you guys have this removed?
Yeah, citizen and I wanted me to ask a few questions on that item.
Okay.
This person wants to know what was being done to try to collect the special assessments or anything. Is anything being done? What was done?
Yes, the county has contacted us with regard to this property, where there are instances where there are property tax delinquencies. In this case, there's both property tax delinquencies and special assessment delinquencies. I believe that there's a certain period of time that has to go by in order to enable the property owner to cure that delinquency. And then we have just been recently advised, though, by the county that they were taking the property to foreclosure. So in the foreclosure process, there's an opportunity for anyone to bid on the property. And then our understanding is that any winning bid, the amount that would be the winning bid would be split amongst the property tax jurisdictions in order to help cure at least part of the delinquency.
I think as well, we've made efforts to contact the individual who is responsible for paying these to encourage that those payments be made. And we're looking at policy revisions as to incentivization, so that if in fact somebody has delinquencies in either property tax or special assessments, they would not be eligible for incentives. Obviously, that's a policy determination by this city commission, but that's something you'll see when the incentive policy comes forward. There'll be a reference to it in the application, and there'll be suggestions as to language in the policy.
Okay. Because one of the individuals, the owners is Doug Compton, and my understanding, he has several, like 2 or 3 different incentives that he's taking advantage of right now on other properties. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And there's no way we can go back and have him pay up for this property?
Well, I think
Based on-
that's what, you know, specific to your question, you asked, what are we doing? And from my standpoint, I think you have to create the nexus between outstanding taxes and special assessments, and then other programs that an individual, whether it be Mr. Compton or anybody else, would try and pursue, so that, in fact, they understand the obligations that exist. This is just one of the parcels in that development. And so some of the others, while they haven't reached the stage with the county that they're going to tax forfeiture sales, there's others that are delinquent for a number of years as well. So that's a real serious issue. We were having a conversation amongst staff about that today. So to the extent that you can tie bar, you know, other incentive type things or other issues, I think that that's something that this commission would want to consider going forward, but that's not in place right now.
Okay. I just find it very disturbing that on one hand, Mr. Compton's getting incentives, and on the other hand, he decides he doesn't want to pay property taxes on other property, and I just think that's deplorable.
Diane, is the law from the county, is it still 3 years and then foreclosure, it's to go to the foreclosure deal?
Do you happen to know, Randy or Tony, exactly the time frame? I know with this one, it's a little bit, it has gone a little bit longer than that 3-year time frame.
I think it was 4 years, but typically it's 3 years, but sometimes it gets extended. I think there were some negotiations between the county and the landowners in this case, and then I think they reached an impasse, and then they went ahead to go foreclosure.
So when would we have been notified of the unpaid assessments and the property tax?
Once the petition was filed to foreclose, which was sometime late summer, early fall.
Okay.
And the
So-
county reached out to us, Mayor, to talk to us about what our alternatives were at this point, but these are sizable outstanding balances, and the ones we were looking at today, I would tell you they're at 4 years as well. And those numbers, I think, are even more significant than this particular parcel. They cover a much larger piece of property that's been served by those improvements. You know, tax forfeiture sales are not entirely uncommon across the country, but when you start talking about special assessments for public improvements, that's a different kind of scenario that I think is of equal or maybe greater concern, because usually those improvements and those assessments resulted from a petition for the development of that property, and then for those not to be paid, that's a serious concern. Now, and the developer's argument is going to be that those properties were actively marketed and they weren't able to get them sold, and so forth. And quite frankly, that's an issue that's out there in terms of these types of properties. So when we get those petitions, we probably need to do a better economic analysis as to the marketability of those properties before we go along with making public improvements based on a special assessment.
Okay.
How difficult is it for city staff to look into tax delinquencies on an individual when a lot of their property is disguised under various LLCs?
Well,
I guess where I'm going with that is, you know, very recently, we've had one of those individuals come before us. And I guess what I don't understand is why that information wasn't part of the staff memo, that, hey, the petitioner before you also happens to owe $250,000.
well, that isn't in your current policy. And so I think some of these things have developed a bit more recently, and so we're trying to try and draw a parallel in our policy as to how those things should be working. I would tell you that the application for incentives, and Britt's here, and a lot of times what you'll see is an application will have an LLC listed, but we're asking for ownership in excess of 5%. So now you have that information as a part of the application that can then be linked to the search on forfeiture, or on delinquency rather, and you can make that connection and then make that a part of your policy. I think the other thing that we talked about with Mr. Jackson today was, what about individuals that may have litigation against the city? Are those other, you know, you should know those types of things in making a determination on an incentive. So
Right.
that's one of the things we're going to be coming back to when that policy comes. Unfortunately, that policy, these issues are so fresh that discussion did not take place at PERC or at the affordable housing, because this was kind of evolving from the county and their discussions with us. And so now we're looking at those issues to try and strengthen the incentive policy.
So if Mr. Compton comes before us, or anybody for that matter comes before us, asking for incentives going forward, can we go back to this and ask them to pay the difference between what would the foreclosure sale gained and what still is owed?
I think you retain unilateral discretion on the issuance of incentives to begin with.
Okay.
I would say to you, you can always ask. And you can, and as I say, you retain the authority on an incentive, so you can make it quite clear you're unhappy about that issue, and then it's up to you to make a decision based on how you vote as to the actual incentivization. Legal counsel's behind me. If they have a legal opinion on that issue, they can certainly speak up.
No, I would agree with what you stated. Incentives are discretionary, so you have the authority to consider
Okay.
you think are relevant factors.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the reason that I asked the question on the 3 years and then foreclosure, at what point would we have had the information? Would it have even been available at the time that we considered the last request from this developer?
You know, I don't know exactly what's available, but I would think that you could determine any property taxes that are behind in payment by a check with the county on, you know, as these applications come in.
Again, I think the complexity is something that Commissioner Herbert brought up, though. In this case, it is a different LLC. It's not evident exactly who the parties are unless you do a little more digging on it. So I think in the incentive policy, as Mr. Markus was talking about, what our recommendation will be is that, that those entities with which they're an LLC member are revealed on the application so that we can do a good job of searching for those entities to double check the tax status.
Okay. So other than receiving this report at this time, is there any other action that you need from us or recommendation that you need from us?
None other, unless there's other action that the commission would like to pursue, which may include placing a bid on the property if that would be of interest to the city. There are cities in such circumstances that wish to be a bidder, given the outstanding special assessments on the property. I think there's a variety of reasons here why we may not want to do that. We're not recommending that.
I would say, at least my opinion would be, is I would not want us to be a bidder on this property.
I
I think
agree.
you have to make a determination, do we have an interest in the property, do we have
Right.
a use for the property? We haven't determined that there is one for the city.
Right.
And then the other issue is, you know, is there a viable bidder out there that may come up with some bid amount that would then pay off certain of those assessments and outstanding taxes?
Right. Okay. Okay, thanks, Diane. Is any public comment on this item? Okay, back to the commission then. The item is before us is to receive the report on the outstanding property taxes and special assessments due on East Side Acquisitions LLC. This is located at 2460 Fairfield Street. In addition to receiving this report, is there any other direction that the commission wants to pass along to staff at this time?
I'd like to make sure we see that get in our incentive policy, even to the point of not just being mentioned in a city staff memo, but rather at the point at which Brit's services are required, instead of us dedicating any city staff time to an individual that owes the city money. I think that's got to be, you know, at point of contact, that they cannot be in debt to the city if they're going to be applying for an incentive.
Right.
I mean, I'm surprised that's not standard policy already. You know, KU will withhold your diploma if you have a $25 parking ticket. Why is it that we're giving out tax incentives to people who owe $250,000?
Well, we can have a change in our policy brought back fairly quickly to add this language,
Yeah,
correct?
it's scheduled to be back in front of the commission on the 20th
Okay, so
of this month.
that's fine.
And I think the commissioner has a good point as to whether we should, you know, even start down that path unless there is hard evidence that the payments will be taken care of to retire those.
Okay. Fair enough. So we'll see that on the 20th, and we'll be able to deal with that then. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I would entertain a motion then to approve or to receive the report, item number 16.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second to receive the report. Was made by Commissioner Herbert, second by Commissioner Larsen. All in favor of that motion, aye? Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. Next item on our agenda is general public comment, and the public is allowed to speak on any items or issues that are not scheduled on the agenda after first being recognized by the mayor. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make any decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer the items to staff for follow-up. Individuals are asked to come to the microphones, sign in, state their name and address, and speakers should address all comments and questions to the commission. So is there any general public comment tonight?
Dan Dannenberg, 270 2702 University Drive. The city has successfully deployed another weapon in its ongoing guerrilla war against neighborhoods. There is a large blue rollaway that sits in front of 2708 University Drive, and I've complained about it, of course. That doesn't, I'm just a nobody, so nothing's going to happen. And it's large. It completely obstructs the sidewalk. Anybody walking down the sidewalk has to walk into the street to get around the thing. It's been there for weeks. It will be there for months, because I think the owner of the property is one of the sainted non-resident property owners, who is one of the higher caste members of the community. There's another such smaller box at a residence at the northeast corner of Crestline and Yale, and that has been there for I don't know how many months, but it just stays there. Now, I don't know if there's any time limit on how long these rollaways can be kept on a piece of property, or what the rules are, if any. I guess once you get one, you can keep it there as long as you want, in perpetuity, I guess. But this is a very effective weapon in neighborhoods. It does a lot to degrade and the neighborhood. The other thing on my street is that there is a large yellow truck with a trailer attached that has been parked on the street somewhere around the 2800s of University Drive. Now, I think the owner of the property in question is out of state, so there again, he is one of the, and I'm pretty sure it's a male, he is one of the higher caste property owners in the state, in the city. And of course, I complained about it, and he backed it up a few feet, and then, by the way, both vehicles have New Mexico license plates. And how long this truck will be there, I don't know. A vehicle like that should not be allowed in neighborhoods. There are storage places and parking lots around the city where it could be stored for probably a fairly modest amount of money if it's not going to be used, and to the best of my knowledge, it's not going to be used. And if the owner of these vehicles or renter or whatever he is who I think it is, he drives a pretty fancy personal vehicle. So it's not a matter of him not having the funds to park that thing someplace else. But now we will it's been there for weeks, and it'll probably be there for a couple of more months or whatever. But the fact that you can allow these things to happen in neighborhoods, as I say, in perpetuity, is really inappropriate and disgusting. And I think there needs to be some attention. You're not going to do anything about sidewalks, we know that. It costs too much money, and you're not going to organize a sliding scale of payment for sidewalks. But between these new weapons that are being deployed and the usual seedy, greedy, indecent landlords and their feral tenants, the guerrilla war is being won, not by neighbors, but by these for-profit entities, and it's just not a good situation. And something needs to be done to rectify it, and I think I know what that is, and that would consist of getting rid of this panoply of basic incompetence and getting a new form of government that can represent citizens and not just special interests.
Good to see you, Dan. Other general public comment? Any other public comment?
How's it going? It's
Good,
been
how are you?
been a few weeks. But I'm Steve Smazniak. Just wanted to put everything into perspective for everybody here about what we just saw. What happened is you have identified a way in which the system as it exists does not serve the Lawrence community as a whole. You said we can fix this rather quickly in regards to a tax loophole. We even had the city lawyers weigh in on it here today. Okay? Yet here we are, 6 months after CABFIP has asked for additional oversight ability, waiting patiently for the system to represent all of its constituents in life and death matters. So I know I'm waiting patiently. I really do look forward to next week. I'll be here. And a lot of us will be here, I hope. But I really look forward to talking about it. I just wanted to put that into perspective that it's been 6 months. But when we start messing with your money, your $250,000 is appearing to be more important than somebody's life. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Any other general public comment? Okay, thank you all. On to the regular agenda. The public is allowed to speak on any of the regular agenda items or give public comment after first being recognized by the mayor. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address, and speakers should address all comments and questions to the commission. First item is to consider the following items related to the HERE parking project. And we have several items to consider there, but Scott, you'll give us.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, members of the commission. I'll just bring up one map quickly. You're fairly familiar with this project, so I'll just briefly summarize the issue before you. As you know, this property is located on Fambro Drive between Illinois Street and Mississippi Street. It's intended to be an accessory parking lot with about 68 parking spaces to accommodate the HERE project, which is catty-corner to it to the south and east. The current zoning today has this portion of it as RM32 and the rest of it as UKU today. There's RM12D duplex zoning to the west and RM32 to the east and KU, of course, to the south. There is a code requirement that any accessory off-site parking match or be greater zoning than the property it serves. So when we looked at these facts and the MU zoning that it serves, we looked at the residential unit use that it serves, and that's a 32 unit per acre density. And so we concluded that RM32 is required here. And in order to do RM32 on this property, it required a change to the Oriad neighborhood plan. So we processed that through the system. It came to you on first reading and received, based on a recommendation from the Planning Commission, received approval to rezone the west side of the alley and then this other parcel, along with this parcel, to RM32 with the plan development overlay. You saw the preliminary development plan and approved that as well. After the first reading, some in the neighborhood challenged staff's interpretation of the code based on that issue of having like or greater zoning, and brought us to a discussion about whether RM12D-PD would suffice to accommodate the surface parking lot. We still don't believe that the code is interpreted to allow that, but we've also, in consultation with the city attorney's office, believe that the governing body can waive that section of the code, grant the RM12D-PD zoning, and upon second reading, alter the ordinance. So what we've provided you then are two options noted in your memo. Option one is to uphold the Planning Commission recommendation, adopt on second reading the ordinance that changes the zoning to RM32-PD. We also believe you should initiate a text amendment to the parking standards to clarify the issue. That option one requires a simple majority vote because it's in alignment with the Planning Commission recommendation. Option two is also available to you, and that's to waive sections 20-909 and 20-535, allowing a lesser zoning district to serve a higher zoning district. To do that, we would ask that you make a motion to deny ordinance 9300, which is the comp plan component of this, because it's no longer needed, and adopt on second reading a revised ordinance rezoning the entire property to RM12D-PD zoning. And then we still would ask that you initiate that text amendment. Option 2 does require 4 out of 5 affirmative votes because it's different than what the Planning Commission recommended to you. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Okay, questions of Scott?
So option 2, item 1, about waiving the sections of the code. I thought it was, the neighborhood had indicated they interpreted it differently. Are you?
They do interpret it differently, and there's a process to challenge interpretations of the code that go through the Board of Zoning Appeals, not the governing body. And so if we want to uphold that part of our processes, then we don't believe you're interpreting the code in their favor. We believe you're waiving the code section that accommodates their outcome, which is RM12 zoning, RM12D zoning.
Is the waiver the same thing as applying the exception?
A waiver waives the exception, essentially.
So it's not, then we're not applying the exception. Because I thought that they were interested in applying the exception.
The outcome is the same, it's just a different way. We believe it's working within the current code to get to their outcome of RM12D-PD. And then we'll follow up with a text amendment that makes it clear to everybody what the intent of the code should be.
So waiving the code is not an exception, is what you're saying? Regardless of the outcome
Right,
being the
it's-
same.
Well,
It's not what the neighborhood wanted.
it's the outcome the neighborhood wants. It's not agreeing to their interpretation of the code. That stands because that hasn't been overturned by the Board of Zoning Appeals or the court after that. So what you're doing is waiving the section of the code as staff has interpreted it through the process.
But the code included an exception. So we aren't waiving the code, we're just applying the exception.
That's one way to look at it.
When was the last time we waived the code?
We waived the code on this
body,
project.
This body, yeah.
We,
You could say
You-
right here.
Yeah,
right here we have.
yeah. That's it,
It's rare.
yeah.
We have done it on some other plans where you have seen the site plan. Occasionally, you have that ability to do that.
Yeah, but I can't imagine very often that
It is not very often, Mayor. No.
I've seen us do that, so. yeah.
So there's not a third option to apply the exception. That would be option 3.
Well, the way we have interpreted the code, there's no exception to apply here. The way they have interpreted the code, there is an exception to apply. But either way, the outcome is RM12D zoning, and so we think that this is in keeping within the framework of the existing code. If you initiate the text amendment, we'll alter the code, and we'll be much closer to the intent of what the code, of what we believe the code, and what you ultimately will affirm or adjust the code to be.
I'm just having trouble putting in the same sentence that within the code, we're waiving the code. That doesn't sound grammatically or logically correct.
The code provides several ways to waive it, to waive certain sections, and this is but one of them. There are ways administratively that my position has authority to waive administratively certain standards. The Board of Zoning has, the Board of Zoning Adjustment has ways to adjust certain standards. And in these rare instances, what we have done is we have lifted up our authority to waive the code to the governing body for a final decision.
Okay.
I think I would like to see option 3, which is applying the exception that was attached to the language inside of the code. Do you have that on here? That language
I do not.
at all?
I can get there, I think. this is the language we're talking about. So the exception that they're, and we talked a little bit about this at our 2 meetings ago, that 20-909 requires that shared and off-site parking require the same or more intensive zoning class than that required for the most intensive uses served by the shared or off-site parking. In this case, what is served is residential use, because the commercial for here is served by the on-street parking. Then it also says, except as permitted in section 2535. And when you read through this, these 3 items we have always interpreted as to be the exception. So you have to meet this threshold of like or higher zoning unless you're a C zoning district in an RO or RM zoning district. That's the exception, where you're a higher district going to a lower district. What the neighborhood has said is that in this yellow highlight, accessory parking may be permitted in a different zoning district by site plan approval. And that's the rule they're saying is the exception. The issue with that, in our opinion, is that all accessory parking is site planned. So you need only follow the process of site planning to get parking anywhere in the city to serve any district in the city. And we think that's the failing of this code language, which is why we want to see it amended. But that has been our interpretation on other cases.
Is the site plan larger than 10,000 square feet?
Yeah. 4 lots. Yeah.
So we could have just skipped the last 10 minutes and said that number 2 doesn't apply for the exception to be approved.
Right, I was using that as an example of one of the criteria. Right, we don't think any of these apply.
1 and 3 don't apply? It's already zone RM. And the site plan includes screening, doesn't it?
Well, it's not parking for a non-residential use. It's a residential use that we're trying to serve.
Well, it says accessory parking for a non-residential use shall in no case be allowed in an RS zoning.
Right,
But
and that doesn't
the
apply 'cause it's
district currently is zone RM.
RM. right.
Yeah.
It's not a non.
Not RS.
Well,
It's a residential use.
so, but it's commercial as well.
No,
It's mixed use.
Yeah, the commercial's on the street.
The commercial's accommodated on the street parking. Vice Mayor, what we were trying to do is accommodate the neighborhood's request to get to RM 12D zoning. And we feel like we've got a path to that without abandoning the interpretation of the code that we have used in the past and that we use with this project. There will be time for the neighborhood to argue the merits of the code if the text amendment is initiated.
So there is an option 3, and that would have been the exception, but you're saying that 1 and 2 of 20-535 don't apply. I just
What-
want to make sure I have this straight.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that this word "except as permitted," what the neighborhood is calling an exception, we're saying it really should be, if you're in a circumstance of 1, 2, and 3, then we could entertain lower zoning districts than what you're serving. But none of these apply. And so we had before us a situation where we had residential use in residential districts that needed the same or higher zoning district than what we had to start with. So we worked to try to get that to a higher level zoning district, the RM32. That impacted the Oriole neighborhood plan, which is what caused the consternation with the neighborhood, essentially. So after learning of their issue with that, we looked for ways to find a path to get to keep the Oriole neighborhood plan, would it designate it as low-density residential, and keep the RM12D on that west side.
So the correspondence, I thought it sounded like that the neighborhood was still looking for the exception. So did you let them know? The last thing I saw was Kyle Thompson's letter.
This was the latest letter. I think this one was from Candace, voicing support for option 2.
So this was on November 15th.
Kyle's letter, we haven't had a recent letter from Kyle as far as I know. I don't know if he's here. No. And they're happy to speak to option 2. I don't want to put words, I never want to put words in the mouths of others.
Get there in a minute, but is there any other questions of Scott then? Unless you got your questions answered for now?
Yeah?
Okay. Anybody else have questions of Scott? Okay. Scott, don't go away.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Public comment? Miss, wait, just hold on a second. Let us finish this item and we'll get right to you, okay?
Okay.
We're just gonna finish this item, okay? But I promise we'll get to you, okay? Okay. Is there any public comment on this item?
Good evening, Mayor and City Commission. Marcy Francisco, 1101 Ohio. I'm pleased to be here in support of the City Commission considering and adopting the option 2 that the staff has given. I think the concern that I had was that we could keep a comprehensive plan that identified a particular area of the neighborhood as low density. And this allows that to proceed. Because if either identifying the exception or waiving these sections does have the same result in allowing the parking to be built on a RM 12D parcel. Again, I really appreciate the idea that we're not changing the comprehensive plan and thinking about changing it back. We're not making a zoning that's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. And I think we agree with staff that we've identified awkward wording, so it doesn't necessarily have to be part of the same action, but it would be very appropriate for the commission to consider changes to the text amendment that we can all agree on what the wording is and what we, or how we want to proceed in the future with allowing for parking on parcels that are not part of the same parcel and to use that parking. So appreciate your willingness to consider this and to continue the discussion and be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Marcy.
Question? Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comment?
I'm Candace Davis, and thank you so much for reviewing this again and reconsidering the initial recommendation. As someone who's lived in the neighborhood a long time in Oriad, I am in favor of option 2. Also, as the chair of the Lawrence Association of Neighborhoods, we are in favor of option 2. And I want to point out that this is a fairly unique situation. I wouldn't anticipate that it's going to come up again. And I would remind you, too, that with regard to this HERE project, I would say there have been many exceptions that have taken place with regard to that, that I think we've dealt with. So as a neighborhood, I appreciate that you will maintain the Oriad neighborhood plan as it is written, and that area will remain a lower density area, which is RM 12D. And it would be great if the language is clarified so that anyone could understand it, and I'm certainly confused. So anyway, thanks very much.
Okay. Any other public comment on this item?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Brian Sturm. I live at 305 Lawrence Avenue. I'm also a landscape architect at Land Plan. I've been representing both KU Endowment and the ownership of the HERE property. I just want to state on their behalf that both owners in this situation are fine with both options, 1 and 2. They don't really impact how this parking lot would look and how Fambro Drive would be realigned, which is really their primary objective. I will state that on their part, certainly for my part, our goal throughout this year trying to devise this scenario has been to work with your city staff, as well as the neighbors, to come up with a solution here that works for as many people as possible. So option number 2, if the governing body determines is the way to go, is certainly something that the property owners will be in favor of.
Okay. Any other comment? Anyone else? Okay, back to the commission. Okay, when we considered this item several weeks ago, there was one sticking point, and it had to do with the RM12, the RM12 being considered as a possibility, especially on the lots that were on the western side of this property. And this accommodates and takes care, if we follow this and we clean up the language and such, this takes care of at least, I think one commissioner's concerns about that zoning not having to go to a higher zoning category and does that. So it also takes away the concern of the change in the comprehensive plan and not having to go back and redo that at a later date also. So I think as Scott mentioned and others have said, it probably takes care of, the final outcome takes care of probably where it needs to be. So maybe not by the exception, but the rule is there. So seems to me it makes some sense. Okay. Anyone else?
No, I'm in favor of that option too. That provides the best protection for the neighborhood from what I understand.
Okay. And so items number 1 in item 2 requires a supermajority. Is that right, Scott? Is that the only one?
Yeah, because it goes against the planning commission.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So everybody seem to agree option 2 ought to be it?
Yep.
Okay. So the first action that we need to take is to waive the sections 20-909 and 20-535 of the Land Development Code, thereby allowing a lesser zoning district to serve as a higher zoning district with accessory parking. And then we do the following. One is, and this is the action that we need to take, one is to deny ordinance number 9300 for the comprehensive amendment to amend the ORIAD plan. And do we have to do these separate, Scott?
I think that'd be fine.
Okay, well, let's do that one first. Item number 1 then is to deny ordinance number 9300.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made and second to deny ordinance number 9300. That was made by Commissioner Boley, second by Commissioner Herbert. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. Next item is to adopt on second reading a revised ordinance number 9301, rezoning the entire subject property to RM12D-PD zoning district. Entertain that motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second to adopt on second reading a revised ordinance number 9301 with the zoning change made by Commissioner Boley, second by Commissioner Herbert. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. And the next item is to initiate a text amendment to sections 20-909 and 20-535 of the Land Development Code to be rolled into a text amendment currently in process that includes comprehensive revisions to Article 9, the parking of the code. Entertain that motion for initiation.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second to initiate that text amendment, made by Commissioner Larsen, second by Commissioner Herbert. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes 5-0. Thank you all very much.
Question, Mike.
Sure, please.
Do we have to explicitly waive the sections 2909 and 2535 to do what we've done, or is it inferred by our votes?
I think you did that with your
Yeah.
motion language.
Thank you.
Okay. I would like to have the commission's permission to go back to public comment. There was an individual that wanted to come forward, and probably my explanation wasn't the best on general public comment. Again, the items that you bring before us tonight will just be made to the commission and referred to staff, just so that you know, we don't make decisions on the items as they come forward during general public comment, okay? Thank you. Is that all right with everybody?
That's fine.
Okay.
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 So my name's Vivica Price. I live 3001 West 30th Court. So recently, last Thursday actually, we led a student walkout. Jasmine and I both did. And we came to City Hall here, and we spoke to the city manager about a list of demands that we're going to present to you right now. So I'll just read the entire document. I think you have a copy of it. In light of recent national political events, we request that the City of Lawrence issue a statement of solidarity with the members of its community. We are aware of your solidarity statement with Black Lives Matter and the No Dakota Access Pipeline, Standing Rock. However, there are still people at risk, and we ask for a more detailed letter to address the further safety of our community. Any statements made are to include the disabled, people of color, immigrants, Native tribes, refugees, Muslims, LGBTQ persons, and all other marginalized groups. To ensure that all demands are met, we ask that the Lawrence Police Department also issue the statement of solidarity. Any statements made are expected to address all marginalized groups. The statement should include the following. From Chapter 10, Article 1, Human Relations, the practice or policy of discrimination against persons by reason of race, sex, religion, color, national origin, age, ancestry, familial status, sexual orientation, disability, or gender identity is a matter of concern to the City of Lawrence. As addressed in this article, the City of Lawrence stands with the belief that discrimination is unlawful and puts those affected by it in danger. This section protects these groups only in career, education, business, and housing. We feel that in order to promote a safe city, changes will need to be made to this article and those related to it. We ask that the revisions made include the promotion of safety from the police department and the creation of a city sanctuary city. 2, Lawrence will not label Black Lives Matter and any groups which promote social justice as criminal or terrorist organizations. The city will not attack any of these groups or those in attendance. Lawrence will not assist, cooperate, or aid in the surveillance of persons belonging to the Muslim, immigrant, or refugee communities in any way. We request Lawrence lawmakers to design legal strategies to resist federal policies which would put marginalized groups in danger. And we also request Lawrence lawmakers to design legal strategies to resist any possible defunding of businesses and organizations that include and are similar to Planned Parenthood, although I was recently informed that the Planned Parenthood that we used to have in Lawrence was shut down in 2008 due to defunding. So, all requests demanded above are to be included in any public statements and letters made to the people of Lawrence. Upon meeting these demands, Lawrence will stand as a sanctuary city and align itself with all members of their community. So that's
We do hope that you guys can allow as much discussion about this topic as you have with previous ones, because this is just as important, if not more important, than a lot of things that have been discussed. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. And could we have your name also, please?
Oh, Jasmine Machete.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. And I apologize for not making general public comment as clear as I could have. Okay. So, Tom, you have copies of this?
We have copies of it. We just came back from the National League of Cities Conference. Students are encouraged to get involved in local government. You have a great example of students from Lawrence High School coming down here and petitioning the city commission, and so it would be my recommendation that appropriate staff persons sit down with these students and work out the language that they're requesting. I think there's some things that probably need further refinement, but I think in general there's some comments that and statements that this commission could make, and we would come back with a recommendation and hopefully secure the students' concurrence in those recommendations as well.
Okay. Any comments or questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming this evening, okay? Don't be walking out of school, okay? That's. I think a long time ago I might have been involved with something like that. Anyway, thank you all. Anyway, okay, so we appreciate you all coming this evening, and again, I'm sorry about any confusion that I may have created, okay? Okay, back to the regular agenda. I'm gonna tell you what, if we could take a couple minute break, because I gotta get a drink. Thank you all. So we'll take about 5 minutes, okay?
This is your planning department fridge.
I'm sorry. Okay, the next item is to consider the following items related to the neighborhood revitalization area at 800-815 Vermont for the 8th Street Place project. We do have items to consider. Receive the request from Vermont LLC for a neighborhood revitalization area and industrial revenue bond financing for mixed-use project at 800-815 Vermont Street. 2, to receive the recommendations from the Public Incentive Advisory Committee and the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. And 3, continue the public hearing from November 1st, 2016 on the establishment of the NRA and to consider adopting ordinance number 9303, establishing the revitalization area and approving the NRA plan, and consider adopting resolution number 7173, authorizing industrial revenue bond financing for the purpose of assessing a sales tax exemption on project construction materials. Okay, so, Britt.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Britt Crumcano, City Economic Development Coordinator. As we've done with past projects, we're going to follow kind of a very similar outline. I'd like to start by inviting the applicant to come up and talk about their project and their request. Then we will go through eligibility and analysis. We have staff analysis as well as consultant analysis that will be presented. Some additional considerations and conclusions. We'll go over the recommendations. And then basically the next steps, which would be having this item go to the county and the school district for their consideration and participating in the NRA, and then back to you for final consideration. So with that, I'd like to invite the applicant up to again talk about their project and their request.
Good evening, Mayor, City Commissioners. Thanks for allowing me to make my presentation on the agenda tonight. With me tonight, I have Stan Hernley Associates, he's a project architect. I have Laura McInerney and Michael Lee and McInerney attorneys. My wife, Sandra, who is a co-partner in this development, was going to be here, but she is detained at Baker University due to her professional work, so she can't be here tonight. I just got a call from her. Let me flip on here this slide. I don't know which one it is. 2.0 is the elevation. Good guess on both our parts, right? First of all, the first thing I want you to know, I don't owe any taxes. And in fact, I have made out my check that's going in on Friday for this next round of taxation. So I'm good to go there. Only if I don't make it back to my office by tomorrow might there be a problem. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the project itself because we've talked about it and it's in the technical report, and you can, you've heard me talk about it, so in sake of trying to be time efficient. If you do recall, though, the history of that lot is that in 1990 there was a massive fire and it burned 2 structures down, and nothing's ever been replaced, and so it's vacant, underutilized piece of downtown. I'd like to talk about three things first, and then I'm going to turn it over to Michael Lee and let him make a few comments. First, I'm currently on the 21st month of my municipal journey regarding my project. I've been to the Historic Resources Commission for 3 meetings, which lasted over 4 months. I've been before you 3 times, gathering comments and advice. I have appeared before the Affordable Housing Advisory Board and the Public Incentives Review Committee. I've conferred with your Economic Development Director, Ms. Britt Crumcano, and developed 21 different reports for review by your consultant, Mr. Tom Jackson. Through all this activity, I've delivered all the information I could get my hands on and cooperated with commissioners' different requests along the way. The technical report reflects an extremely comprehensive study of my proposed project. With all this before you, I respectfully request a final decision tonight. Point number 2, my request is for an NRA that reflects a 10-year 75% tax abatement and the issuance of an IRB. The technical report indicates that this incentive will result in an IRR, or internal rate of return, of 7.94%, which is 0.06% below the minimum level where an investor would choose to make such an investment. The normal range is 8 to 10%, therefore this project would not happen without the recommended incentive. For the record, this project without any incentive would produce a 5.78 IRR, which is too low to justify an investment. Unlike last month's request, this project has no flexibility regarding the incentive request. Point number 3, I talked to all of you individually during the past 2 weeks. Commissioner Boley posed an interesting question. He asked me what type of building would I build without an incentive? And I responded that most likely a 2-story building, a 2-story structure with commercial on the first floor and office on the second, pretty much as it's laid out in this elevation right now. He then asked me to ask Mr. Jackson to compare the 2 buildings, my current 5-story application and the hypothetical default structure, as to what each structure would pay in property taxes over a 50-year period. The answer is very noteworthy. The default structure, without any incentives, would pay, I rounded this off a little bit, would pay $6.2 million, and the current project with incentives would pay $13.2 million, resulting in an advantage of, to the taxing authorities of $7 million. Additionally, these types of buildings most often last longer than 50 years as well. I've tried to be complete and thorough in addressing all of the Commission's policies, changes to the requirements along the way, and generating additional information for specific commissioners. I would respectfully request your positive consideration tonight. Thank you.
Any questions for Bob right now? Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Michael Lee of Lee & McInerney Law Firm. My partner, Laura McInerney, and I represent Bob and Sandra Shum and Vermont Place, LLC concerning the proposed development in the 800 block of Vermont Street. And we know that you've heard a lot about this project over the past several months, so I certainly don't want to take a lot more time this evening, but a brief summation may be helpful. Currently, the area located in the 800 block of Vermont is a vacant lot. Bob and Sandra Shum proposed to develop the vacant lot so that that lot can then add to the business and residential landscape of the downtown area. And as Bob just said, the development will consist of a mixed-use, commercial, offices, and then condos. And as a part of this, the developer is requesting that the city approve a 75% real property tax rebate for a period of 10 years, and also the issuance of the IRB. And really, at the end of the day, approval of the requested incentive makes sense when you take everything into account. Now, the consultant, Tom Jackson, will come up here soon, so I certainly don't want to get too much into the technical report and into the numbers. But without the 75% rebate, the project just can't move forward. As you'll hear from Mr. Jackson, the reasonable minimum for the internal rate of return on this project is 8%. with the requested 75% rebate, the developer is still just below the minimum. So here, there simply isn't any wiggle room. This isn't one of those instances where a 50% rebate or a 60% rebate is going to make this project move forward. Unfortunately, that flexibility with the financing gap and with the internal rate of return just isn't there. So really, it's 75% or nothing moving forward. And it's important to note when you're thinking about this and thinking about just your policy decisions and how they apply in this situation, is oftentimes the property tax rebates are viewed as, what is the city giving? What sort of a rebate, how much is the city giving up? And it's really important to keep in mind in this case, there has to be consideration for what the city will be losing over the long term and what it can get of these collections of the property taxes. As Bob mentioned, even with a 75% rebate for the first 10 years, the project as proposed will yield property tax collections of approximately $13.2 million. Since this project can't proceed without the requested incentives, if the commission were to deny those incentives, there'd be something built there eventually, but what will be built won't net that same gain in property tax collections over the life of the building. And the projections that we have comes out to about $6.2 million, so about $7 million less than this project. So the important question isn't, is 75% too much? Should we cap it at 50? The important question is, do we want to lose millions of dollars over the life of this building after the NRA expires? Because not approving the incentives and not allowing this type of property to be built there, really that's what that would equate to, the loss of millions of dollars going forward. So certainly when you look at the dollars and cents, the calculations are pretty straightforward and lead to a pretty straightforward result. However, even if the math isn't a sufficient basis, the commission can also look at a laundry list of public benefit and public good that this property will create. The development will be energy efficient and will be built to the 2012 International Energy Conservation Code. Additionally, the development will be LEED certified, so the commissioners can feel good that the developer has sustainability at the forefront of this project. The development also has an affordable housing component. There will be one unit that will be dedicated as affordable housing in perpetuity, and the income guidelines for that unit were prepared in the NRA plan in conjunction with the Lawrence Community Housing Trust, and I believe that Rebecca Buford's here and may provide some comment on that. But that unit is going to be affordable in perpetuity, and the Lawrence Community Housing Trust will be kind of tasked with overseeing how that transfers in the event of sale. And that's all outlined in the NRA plan. The project also promotes infill development in what is right now a fairly soft economic area of the downtown, and puts something in a lot that's been vacant since 1990. And the mixed-use nature of the property coincides with the general downtown guidelines that the city already utilizes. And it's important to note that the downtown density that this project is going to promote will be helpful to existing businesses in the downtown area, will help create demand for a downtown grocery store, and also just support the restaurants and everything on Mass Street and in the surrounding areas. And with the project as proposed, it has 22 underground parking spaces, so it's important to note that with the incentives, those spaces can be constructed so the residents will not create an additional burden on what is already a stressed downtown parking situation. And concerning jobs, this project will provide approximately 100 full-time jobs while the property is being constructed. The developer has solicited cost estimates from 3 local companies, BA Green, First Construction, and Benchmark, which I think is out of Eudora. So the jobs that this construction will create are all going to be going to local individuals, as much as is reasonable with the type of work and the availability. And additionally, there's going to be 30 high-tech offices on the second floor, which promotes entrepreneurship and, of course, small businesses being in the area. As Ms. Krumkeno mentioned, the eligibility will be talked about in a moment, but I think you'll find that when you look down the eligibility requirements for this project, that the eligibility requirements are met. At the end of the day, what you're going to have to decide is, do you like the project? Do you want those additional millions coming in real property taxes over the next 50 years? And do you want those things enough to provide the incentives that are required for this project to proceed? Bob and Sandra Shum are committed to Lawrence. They both graduated from KU. They have 4 kids. All of their kids graduated from Lawrence High School. 3 of their kids graduated from KU. They're both involved in multiple civic organizations, charities, public boards. In short, I mean, the Shum family has made a long-term investment and many contributions to Lawrence and to the downtown area specifically. And they have a vision for what the downtown area can be. And this development is in keeping with that and in furtherance of that commitment and that vision. And tonight they're requesting that the commission assist them in that vision and assist them in that commitment. And the commission can do so while at the same time reaping all of those public benefits just described, and at the same time obtaining the beneficial property tax amounts that are going forward throughout the life of that building. It's really a win for the city, a win for the downtown area, and a win for the bottom line of the city going forward when you take into account the life of the building. So, with that being the case, I will conclude my comments and yield the floor to the next speaker.
Thanks, Mike.
Again, Commissioners, I'm not going to go through all the details of this project. It's been presented before as well as thoroughly in the technical report. I do want to mention that as far as the analysis goes, the staff did conduct the cost-benefit analysis, and we tried to use the same assumptions as was used in the but-for analysis conducted by NDC. So as we're walking through here, just to let you know that most of these things we've aligned. The affordable housing unit, just some information on that. It will be put in trust and held into perpetuity as an affordable housing unit. The subsidy is approximately $98,000 plus the value of the use of the parking space is about $51,700 and some dollars. The request is for a 10-year 75% NRA or neighborhood revitalization area. Also for a industrial revenue bonds or IRBs in order to get a sales tax exemption on project construction materials. Just to reiterate a little bit about these two programs, the NRA is a tax rebate program. The base value of what the property is currently generating is shielded from the rebate. The percentage of rebate is only applied to the incremental increase in the property value due to improvements, and then only based on the percentage that is granted. The property owners do continue to pay not only the base property taxes, but also what percentage would not be granted in the NRA. The IRB for the sales tax exemption on project construction materials, basically this is a conduit financing mechanism, and there represents no liability on the part of the city. This is just to get a sales tax exemption on the project construction materials. Eligibility for both the NRA and the IRB have both state requirements as well as city policy requirements. The legal staff actually went through the NRA eligibility and produced a memo to that, and so staff does feel that it meets the state NRA eligibility requirements. Staff also believes that it meets the state and city policy for IRB criteria. The analysis for an NRA, as per city policy, we have to do both a cost-benefit analysis, which is a fiscal impact analysis that weighs the cost versus benefits for each of the 4 taxing jurisdictions, the city, the county, the school district and the state. The but-for requirement is going to be handled by Tom Jackson of National Development Council. In the past, the city has also performed a performance analysis as well as used other consultants for the but-for requirement. Tom Jackson brings a lot of expertise, especially when it comes to affordable housing and lender considerations in terms of this gap analysis, and he will go over that in much more detail in just a moment. Cost-benefit assumptions, again, these were pretty well aligned with the gap analysis assumptions. I did want to point out that as far as the project itself, it is estimated to create a part-time position that would be permanent. Our cost-benefit model does not take into consideration any part-time positions or any temporary positions. So all the construction jobs that the applicant indicated, that was not part of the analysis. We have the estimated sales tax savings. I'm going to go over that in a little more detail in just a sec, and as well as the value attributed to the NRA rebate. So here's the breakout of estimated sales tax savings due to the IRB. And as you can see, the city is foregoing about $64,300. The county about $11,000. The state has the largest portion of this, approximately $197,000. The other taxing jurisdictions within the county forego about $2,000 of that. Within our cost-benefit model, I do want to point out that it does not take into consideration the other municipalities. Base property tax assumptions. Basically, this is an estimate on what the property is currently going to bring, and I believe this was done before the mill levy was set. It's estimated at about $7,400 a year. Property tax projections. This came from the NDC gap analysis. The top line basically shows that estimated base value at $7,400. The second line looks at the net tax revenues, and it does take into consideration the NRA rebate at 75% over the first 10 years. Cost-benefit results. The city always likes to see at least a cost-benefit ratio of 1 to 1.25, which means that for every dollar of public investment, we are getting $1.25 in return benefit. In this particular case, the model is showing the city at a 1.78% ratio and the county at a 2.56% ratio. I did want to mention that the school district, again, because there were no new households formed as a result of new permanent employment, we don't have any costs or new students associated with this project, and the state also has no net new cost as a result of this project coming on board. The total value is about $1.285 million for this package. And here is the same results, just kind of formatted according to the program as well as the taxing jurisdiction. This is just a visual of how the NRA works. The NRA, again, if you recall, the base value, which is represented in blue, that is held steady and still paid on, shielding from the NRA rebate. So the developer continues to pay on that value no matter what. The red really shows the net tax revenues that are generated to the taxing jurisdictions, and the green shows the 10 years of rebate that is going back to the developer as a result of the NRA. So to look at tax revenue comparisons, and I did want to just point out that this is going to be a little different than what Tom Jackson shows you. This is showing a comparison of unimproved property, basically the way the property is now, compared to projected improvements according to the project as proposed. So over the 10-year NRA rebate period, the improved property will generate about 6.46 times the property tax revenues compared to if the property was left undeveloped. And then, of course, over time, after that rebate expires, those returns jump quite a bit for the years 11 through 5, or the first 5 years after the NRA rebate expires, it's 27.5 times more property tax revenue. And then, of course, as I'm sure is common sense, a building has a longer useful life than 15 years. So at this point, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Tom Jackson from NDC and let him go over the but-for analysis.
Good evening, Mayor, members of Commission. I've pared down my presentation for tonight from what I showed for the discussion on the Pennsylvania project at our last gathering. And I'll point out where, but going into a little less detail on how we size debt for analysis purposes, getting into a little bit more discussion about risk. So just a reminder that when NDC, National Development Council, defines a financing gap, we're looking at the difference between a project's total project costs, the bank loan that is offered, and equity that's attracted to the project. If that ends up in a negative number, or I'm sorry, a positive number, where bank loan and equity aren't sufficient to cover the project costs, we have a financing gap. In analyzing or defining those terms a little bit better, we don't want just any project costs. We want to look at whether the project costs are reasonable. In this particular project, the developer provided us with 3 separate preliminary cost estimates from 3 different builders, general contractors, a very good level of detail. So discussions, took place back and forth between myself and the developer about various differences between the bids, how the bids could be broken out to identify individual costs for items such as the underground parking and other matters. And so the finding here is that the project costs are reasonable. There's no developer fee built in, even though that's a very common attribute of development costs. So that's one thing that's helping to lower the financing gap in the project. Next question, when we look at bank loan, and we went into this a little with a little more depth in our last discussion, and certainly in front of the Public Incentive Review Committee, but we're looking at prevailing underwriting terms, other conditions in the market, evidence from a bank of term sheet outlining interest rates, underwriting criteria that they're employing, and determine, given the financials of the project, whether or not debt is being maximized to help avoid gaps. Debt's the cheapest money that goes into a project, so we always want to see that maximized. In this case, the project actually exceeded what we would have projected as the maximum debt. So it certainly has not cut back on bank debt as a way of driving additional gap. And finally, equity. Fair return without undue enrichment. I will differ with one thing that the developer and his attorney said, which is that as we get into some numbers here, we'll be looking at, it's not up to me to define what's an unreasonably low return on invested equity. That's completely up to the developer. What I've tried to do in my memo and the presentation that we'll finish up here in a few more slides is just to say what a reasonable return would be to an investor looking to do business in this particular part of Lawrence, which is a very strong market. I'm sure both for the state of Kansas as well as an awful lot of the country that I see. So risks are lower than they are in other areas. Rents are fairly proven, vacancies are low. All of that's come into the analysis in a way that, let's just say that for an investment in your central core, 8 to 10% is a reasonable return. Now that doesn't mean that there's not going to be developers who want a higher return. We spoke to a developer today who says to attract outside capital, they're looking for 18% returns. But certainly it's up to the developer if they wish to accept returns below 18%, below 12%, below 10%. Below 8. There is no minimum return, but there is a reasonable return. So just a recap of my memo that's included in the technical report. We found that the 75% NRA request for 10 years and an IRB sales tax exemption was reasonable, given that the projected debt has been maximized per bank underwriting criteria and market conditions, that the projected sales proceeds from the residential condominiums are reasonable, given the offered product and the current market, and that developer returns on invested equity are reasonable, with approval of the requested NRA and IRB incentives. Now, this table just recaps both the total project costs, $9,275,979, and then the components of the financing, bank financing of just over $3.4 million, condo sales net of transaction costs of just over $3.6 million, and amount of equity that's required of the developer to close the gap between the total project costs and the other two sources of financing, $2.25 million approximately. Given that level of invested equity, what my analysis found was that with the 75% NRA rebate for 10 years and the requested IRB incentive, there's a 7.94% return on invested equity. With just the NRA incentives, not the IRB, the return drops to 7.23%. With just the IRB, it drops to 6.36%. That's without the NRA at any level. And finally, with no incentives, the return would drop to 5.78% on invested equity. This was assuming a sale in year 25, by the way, as we analyzed it. When we look at risk and whether or not that's a reasonable return, just a reminder that developers and investors are looking for or demanding a return on their money given their perception of risk, inflation, and opportunity costs. These three factors together determine the discount rate. And here just, again, a range. We've talked about various ranges, 10, 12, 15%. Any one of those could be a discount rate that's sought by a developer. That discount rate is used to convert future project benefits from cash flow, say in year 10, year 3, tax deductions associated with depreciation, amortization of intangibles, and appreciation, both at sale and refinance, converts those future values to a present value and equals the developer's desired internal rate of return. We talk about the kind of risks that developers are looking at. We're primarily talking about pre-development risks, excuse me. So in that scenario, or when those arise to an excess, the project never makes it to construction due to a lack of adequate financing, regulatory processes, political opposition. All of those can bring a project to a stop before it ever makes it off the drawing board. Construction risks, we're looking at the risk that a project cannot be completed within budget due to cost overruns, change orders in the field. And finally, if you get it built, the developer is going to be looking at operating risks associated with insufficient revenues to pay required operating expenses and debt service. And that can arise through any of the operating expenses. Just to see how those come home to roost in this particular project, cost overruns during construction can lower returns by increasing the need for investor equity. For example, a $500,000 increase in project costs for 815 Vermont would lower projected returns from 7.94 to 6.69 with the requested 75% NRA and the IRB. Higher vacancy rates, escalating expenses, slower growth in rents can also reduce developer returns. So here, just in one scenario, I've increased the very low number provided by the developer of 2.6% vacancy for the commercial space. Appraisals, surveys of the market have put that closer to 10%. So if I take it up to the market, 10% vacancy rather than 2.6%. 4% growth in expenses and only a 2% growth in rents versus 3% that I had modeled in my analysis for both expenses and rent escalation. Lowers the developer's projected IRR from 7.94 to 6.24. Now, those are adverse impacts, cost overruns, worsening conditions over time. The flip side, of course, is that the project can outperform projections through project cost savings, accelerated rent increases, and/or lower rates of expense escalation. Any of these outcomes separately or together could raise the projected IRR over 7.94, or could partially or fully offset adverse trends. So just a way of saying that what I've tried to model is what I believe are reasonable projections, but nobody knows what tomorrow holds. Nobody anticipated the depth of the most recent recession. Certainly a lot of projected financials did much worse than projected when the recession was upon us. Things can be better, that's the risk, and it's that risk that is a major determinant of what a developer is looking for in a return on their invested equity. All right, so here again, I found over time a blend of all of the benefits of owning and investing in real estate to provide the developer with a potential return of 7.94%. I did state my opinion that I believe a return of 8 to 10% is reasonable for the downtown market, the core downtown, which is a very proven and strong market. This is slightly below that. So the conclusion of the report was that given all of the information that I reviewed, the term sheets from lenders, appraisals, conversations with other parties about returns in the marketplace, evidence of sales in the marketplace, that the 7.94% projected internal rate of return is reasonable, and that 7.94% is including the 75% NRA rebate as well as the IRB. Now, as a couple of people have mentioned, city staff passed along a request from Commissioner Boley to look at an alternative project and to see how that compared to the projected or the proposed project, the proposed mixed-use development. In conversations with the developer, I decided to accept his statement that he made earlier that, without the incentives, what would probably be built would be just the commercial component of the proposed project. So the first floor retail, the second floor office, no underground parking, no residential up above. We did discuss whether converting the whole thing to a rental apartment scenario made sense. Quick runs of the numbers pointed out some things that I think you probably all know from just looking at the drawing, which is that unsubsidized rental developments don't generally look like what you've been shown for the building that's proposed here. So bottom line was that with a rental scenario, leaving the condominiums in place, lowering the finishes, but keeping all the rest of the construction, less the underground parking, resulted in very large financing gaps that couldn't be filled with any reasonable amount of both debt and equity. So again, just taking that commercial component, and that's a commercial component that has validation both through my review, but also a valuation that was estimated by the county appraiser's office. So again, a little bit of double check there that those are property tax values that could actually be delivered by that alternative. Taking the assumptions that we had already included in the analysis for the but-for, extending those same assumptions out for 50 years rather than the 15 years, we ended up with numbers that looked like this, that the project as proposed generates total taxes, tax revenues of $14,402,412, that the alternative scenario would generate just over $6.2 million. The total incentives associated with the NRA rebate total 1.206, and change. And when we net that out, we get net property tax revenues for the project as proposed of $13 million to, as indicated earlier, versus the $6.2, $6.3 million with the alternative scenario. So again, we can come up with a lot of other scenarios. I generally discourage hypothetical comparisons because they just haven't gone through the rigor of pre-development to identify likely costs. We can't parse a project so that suddenly only half of the project needs to be built, or only half of the land needs to be purchased to accommodate the alternative project. We can't divide the foundation work by the proportion of the building in square foot that's proposed in the original project. So it's just a lot of difficulty coming up with a reasonable comparison. Here, for property tax purposes, and using valuations that were provided by the county as well as my analysis, we didn't have to worry about investor returns. We didn't have to worry about the financing sources, the debt offered by the bank. So there's no guarantee that the alternative can get built because we really don't have good costs and we don't have good sources. But we do have an estimate of property tax generation, and that's what this is meant to provide for you. So again, we can flip back to the conclusion, or I can just let it hang at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Just some additional considerations as far as this project goes. This project would be the opportunity to develop 2 long vacant parcels to productive use. It does provide an opportunity to promote downtown density, and also it supports infill development and all the benefits of that. The office space will support entrepreneurial activity with hopefully potential economic benefit. And the project will add an affordable housing unit held in perpetuity to the community. Staff conclusions, as far as city-state eligibility requirements, we feel that those have been met for both the IRB and the NRA. The cost-benefit analysis shows that the project exceeds the 1.25 ratio threshold for all the taxing jurisdictions. NDC's gap analysis, which spoke to the but-for, concluded that the requested incentives are reasonable and help to avoid the financing gaps that could make the project economically unfeasible and unlikely to proceed. Property tax revenue comparisons, undeveloped versus the project as proposed. Over the 10-year NRA rebate, approximately 6.5 times as much property tax revenues generated with the project as opposed to undeveloped. And after the NRA expires, those revenues go up even more substantially, as shown with years 11 through 15. The revenues are about 27.5 times what they would be if the property was left undeveloped. Just a couple of staff recommendations. This has to do primarily with performance provisions in the plan, condition all incentives on the complete compliance with all land use requirements for the property, including the city's historic and downtown design guidelines. Failure to comply with these requirements would nullify any incentives approved. We would like to put a time limit so that this incentive offer doesn't just hang out there. So we would like the project to commence within 3 years of NRA plan adoption. And then we would also request evidence of compliance with the affordable housing provision. This did go before the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, or AHAB. They considered this request at their October 10th meeting and reviewed the affordable housing component of the project. They voted to recommend the project to the City Commission. It passed 6-0 with 1 abstention due to a potential conflict of interest. PERC recommendations, our Public Incentives Review Committee, they met on November 1st and considered this project. And they voted to recommend the project as requested, which is, again, the 75% NRA rebate over a 10-year period, as well as the IRB. The motion passed 4-2. Next steps is a public hearing and for you to consider the city participation in the NRA, as well as consider and vote on the IRB resolution of intent. As I had mentioned, this will be going before the school board as well as the county for them to decide their participation. And then it'll come back to you on the 20th for your final action. And with that, that concludes my presentation. Be happy to answer questions.
Questions of Britt?
Question. And this is for either you or Tom, but when you evaluated the, Tom Jackson, sorry. When you evaluated the internal rate of return, how did you factor in the existence of one of the units within the property being a personal residence? Was that accounted for, or was that?
Yeah, basically the approach I took was just that all of the residential property was valued at the same value per square foot, so there was no break for any of the units other than the affordable unit. The affordable unit lowered the revenue, raised the equity requirement by about $55,000 versus the market sale. I've seen unfinished penthouses go for less than small units on a square foot basis. I've seen finished penthouses go for more. Of course, they're the penthouse. In this particular case, I think Lawrence's condominium market is evolving. We had a chance, several of us, to tour some unsold condominiums today, and I think I can see why they're still unsold. They're beautiful, but they're probably a little overpriced. So, you know, as more data, more numbers come in, we'll see what the actual sales come in at. But sales below cost or below projection, normal to get some sales started up front in projects like this. The prices rise as the market is proven and as the project is proven over time. Here we've projected all the sales within 3 years, which is very aggressive. And we also spoke with the bank, communicated by email, and found they want a very significant pre-sale number up front here. They're starting at 70%. Maybe as the market gets stronger, they'll drop to 50% pre-sales. But that's a huge hurdle for the developer to clear up front. And
I guess what I'm asking is the actual number, the 7.9% IRR.
Right.
Does that assume that all of the properties are sold to outside owners? Or are we saying that we can achieve a 7.9 rate of return, and in addition, I get a penthouse out of the deal?
It doesn't differentiate who the buyer is. It's just the market value, projected market value offered on the marketplace.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tom?
Sorry.
Tom, I have a question. Has to do with the affordable housing unit. Was there, I assume there's an advantage to the developer, some tax advantage by, you know, selling this piece of property at a pretty reasonable rate. Was there any figure placed into the analysis here for what that advantage may be?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I missed the last part of that.
Is there anything in the technical report that reflects, you know, a tax break that the developer may get for that unit?
It really, what's assumed here is that 100% of the condominiums leave the remaining project condominium. They go into the individual ownership of the condominium buyers. So other than a homeowners association fee, an HOA fee that comes back to support some of the expense associated with the project, there's no other responsibility or transaction between the part that remains in the developer's hands and the individual condominiums. So again, you know, I think in terms of your first question, is there a tax advantage? No, because the condo for the, whether it's the affordable or, you know, any of the remaining condominiums are sold and become a source of offsetting financing for the total project. There's no continuing depreciation benefit or other benefits associated with the condominiums once they're sold and they've bought down the construction financing on the project.
Okay, so this one unit's not going to be valued at $270,000 and sold for $90,000 and $150,000, you know, tax break to his deal, and it's going to have an effect on that IRR.
The only advantage to the owner in those kind of scenarios that you just listed where the sales were less than projected would be that they would have to end up paying off the construction loan with more equity, which would drive their returns down further. And then the good news is they would have less of a gain on sale if they took appreciation on the end. So that'd be about the only tax benefit, is that they wouldn't make anything at sale, or they wouldn't make not anything but not as much at sale or refinance. And Commissioner Bully set me straight if that didn't sound reasonable. But.
I'll live with it. Yeah. I appreciate you going through that exercise, and I think that while we had to make some assumptions to get to that point, I think it addresses concerns that I've heard from citizens when we talk about incentives, that the comparison between no development and this project ignores that there likely would be some development absent the incentives.
Right.
So thank you very much for doing that. And what I take away from your computation is that there would be a significant increase in the revenue to the city, the county, and to the schools from this project if the incentives were granted compared to a project if there were no incentives.
Over time, there's no question that the higher the value of the finished project, the more benefits there's going to be.
Exactly.
So up front, where the NRA benefits are coming out, you know, it's obviously narrowed. But the more time, and when we talk about what's the useful life of a building, again, whether it's 39, 45, 50, 100, I mean, we all know buildings. I live in a 120-year-old house. And
my actual question was 50 years or the useful life of the building, whichever is shorter.
Right, and because you suggested 50, we just picked it. There really is no determined useful life.
So that would be an ongoing asset for our community, providing a significantly enhanced revenue stream.
Right.
If we did the project as proposed.
Well, and I think the fact that this is a very significant condominium project, you've got that much more assurance that there's going to be that ongoing maintenance well into the future. There's really no reason why the homeowners of this would ever allow their units to deteriorate to the point where they didn't have value. So, yeah, again, I think I will say that the alternative is probably overvalued for what would actually be built.
Okay.
We picked it because it had actually been developed, but I will say that the second floor rents that are projected here are close to $40 a square foot on a gross basis, which is just I'll say it's a testimonial to a very creative business plan that the developer has and is utilizing in one of his downtown buildings, where the vibrancy of these very small offices, some of the offices fitted out as hair salons that are ready for people to come in and start a business at. I've only seen in one other place some of those strategies used, and they're very creative. They end up with a very high rent, which drives up the value. So if you really were just looking at a more normal first floor retail, second floor office, I don't think we'd see even those kind of taxes, and the comparison would be that much more dramatic.
But you're comfortable with the takeaway that this project would generate substantially more property tax for the community, for the schools, and for the county than a non-incentivized product.
I'm very comfortable with that.
Thank you.
We looked at the real estate comps on this property. Was Hobbs Taylor Loft the most similar comp we could locate?
And you're talking about the comps on the property alone?
Correct.
Yeah. Again, that was a conversation I had with the developer. One thing I point out in my report is that Pennsylvania project, which we went through a couple weeks ago,
correct.
By contrast, might have been disadvantaged in part because they had had their appraisal done early, and I could really go in and test some of the assumptions that were done. That's not typical that you have an appraisal prior to going in for final financing. You just don't want to have to pay the updates. So here there is no appraisal. It's going to be up to the appraiser to provide an opinion to the senior lender as to the value of the land, as well as to the project as completed, as proposed. The range of comparable sales that the developer provided me with showed that the total valuation here of $700,000 was in the middle of recent land sales. So I did not find it unreasonable.
Okay. Other
Yeah,
questions?
I had a couple of questions. This might be for Brett. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Let me, the total project costs have been quoted as being $9,275,979. Now, our cost benefit model, Brett, uses the amount of what they call the capital investment in the plant of $575,979. Okay, so there's a $700,000 gap there. I'll get this right yet. And my understanding from talking with you earlier is that that's the land cost. Is that correct? But it's my understanding they already own the land. Is that not correct? That the Shums already own that land? So why would that be included in the project cost?
It has value. So, you know, what our test is with NDC is that land can be donated, but anybody could drive a very low return on investment if they said that a piece of property that might appraise for $700,000 was really worth $2 million. So we're looking for a match between the actual value of the land. That's a real cost for any project, is that somebody has to bring land to the project. Now, whether they inherited that and it was purchased, you know, 4 generations earlier, or it's a deal that's under contract and will only close upon approval of financing, the value of the land is an appropriate item in the project cost. It does have value. It is a necessary part of the project.
But I do question why it would add to the project cost if it's already been paid for and the property owner, the current property owner has that property. And the $700,000, the actual appraised value of that land is $456,300.
It's right. We're recognizing there's a gap on that at this point. There's a range. Again, it'll be for the appraiser. But the other thing to look at here is that it's not costing outside financing. It's a component of the equity that the developer's bringing to the deal. So the developer's proposing to bring a total of $2.255 million to the deal. That includes the land. So it's
that includes the
offsetting.
land.
Well,
So the $2.25
yeah,
million is not
a
cash.
cost, as you pointed out, it's not a cost that needs to be covered either by the bank debt or the sale of the condominiums. It's already purchased, so the developer is bringing 2.25 total in invested equity. That includes the value of the land here.
Okay. The parking spaces, had some questions about that. The attorney had indicated there were going to be 22 parking spaces. I think you were talking about that, for the residents. So what about all the parking spaces for the rest of the building? You got 30 offices and you got a first floor commercial.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I hope we have, 50 to 75 people that need places to park, because that means it'll be outstandingly successful. Downtown, by virtue of its zoning nature, receives a bonus, and the bonus is, at this time, not having to provide on-site parking. And so all the businesses, almost all the businesses that I know, there's a few, I guess, would use the public parking system, and that's the bonus that's achieved and helps to densify the downtown. So they would use the 2-hour parking lot across the street or the new parking garage that we just built by the library, of which we're paying special benefit district tax on for about a third of those spaces. So that's what it is. Over the time that I've been in business, I think I've probably been in at least a dozen different special taxing districts or benefit districts for providing off-street parking in terms of the public lots. That's how most of all those were financed, with special district finance, special benefit district financing. So in essence, to your question, is we all have bought the lots over the years, and so we did that with the idea that it would encourage development and therefore use them up. Keep needing to develop more, though, so that's kind of the way it works.
Mr. Chung, the estimated cost of your parking facility beneath the building?
It's high. 1.1 million, I believe, is what the number is. And it was extrapolated from the BA Green bid, and then I had Benchmark bid the project without underground parking, and those two numbers came in within $100,000 of each other. So more or less, I think the underground parking would cost $1.1 million and some change. I mean, I forgot the exact number over there.
So essentially what we have here, if I understand this right, is that the total value of the incentive requested is basically the amount of the parking beneath the building.
It's an offset, yeah. There may be some change either way that goes. And also, to clarify something that was said earlier, I didn't get 3 bids, I got 3 estimates. We don't have biddable documents yet, and it takes a lot longer to prepare a bid, and I don't know how too many contractors are going to sit down and prepare a full-blown bid when you just got, when it's an idea. So not to make that too laborsome on their part and have them cooperate with giving me an estimate. They're pretty tight estimates because like First Construction knows pretty much in real time what construction costs are for residents and commercial because of the work they've done here. I'm sure BA Green knows their stuff very well also. They've done lots and lots of buildings around here, and they did the library for us. So I'm confident with those numbers that they all came out in a pretty tight range, actually.
I agree with that clarification. I believe I qualified it as preliminary bids or something like that. So,
okay. Any other questions?
Other questions? Okay, thank you. Okay.
Britt talked a little bit about infill development. We just went through the star rating system on the sustainability. I was wondering if Eileen could tell us a little bit how this might fit with our score that we had. It seems like we were kind of low on infill development.
Good evening, Commissioners. Eileen Horn, Sustainability Coordinator. As you know, last week we had an exciting announcement with our STAR sustainability score of 4 out of 5 stars for Lawrence. Within STAR, there are 44 objectives, one of which is infill and redevelopment. And the reason this matters from a sustainability standpoint is, we've talked about utilizing existing infrastructure and infill, but also, it will reduce commute times and therefore improve air quality for those that are located near job centers like downtown. Infill supports land conservation because it reduces pressure on greenfield development. And also infill can help promote our active living goals as it creates more walkable and pedestrian-friendly spaces and more destinations in downtown. So all of those are reasons that STAR includes infill and redevelopment in the scoring matrix. We received 4.5 out of the available 10 points in that category. Most of the reasons that we didn't receive points had to do with how we track infill and how intentional we are about infill. But also tracking individual projects where we do infill is a way that we could improve that score. So I think one of the best practices within STAR is to intentionally plan for and determine areas of the city that are appropriate for infill. And that if you all are interested in that, I'd be happy to work with you on that, and we could pull in some best practices from other cities. And then another piece that we didn't score so well in InStar was how we communicate to citizens about the benefits of infill and redevelopment. And that's something we could definitely work on is, you know, some website content or social media or pieces where we share that information with citizens.
Thanks, Eileen.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, any other questions? No, please.
Speaking of sustainability, the LEED certification or the LEED, I've read conflicting things as to exactly what you're proposing on that, Bob. So I was wondering if you could.
Yes, thanks. It gives me a chance to clarify that. After I met with you and we talked about LEED, I went back and read the application that I had submitted, and I found the form maybe a little bit ambiguous, but also in the narrative I had written, we would strive to be designated as a certified LEED in the certified LEED program. Today I changed that, tried to clarify that, submitted it to the city staff at about 1 o'clock or so, and I think they were trying to send that out. But anyway, on page 4 of the application, I changed where it says, will the project seek or be designated to LEED certification? That's where I have a little bit of ambiguity in that I want to build to the certified level of LEED, but I don't want to have to be burdened with the certification of it. So I changed that to yes anyway with that understanding. And then I checked certification on the application, the classification of certification, silver, gold, or platinum. And then in the narrative below, I wrote, project will achieve a certified LEED designation, but will not be inspected and verified by the LEED Association. And I think that's what generally other agreements are that try to build to a LEED level, but not have to go through the cost of the verification, inspection and verification. So just to clarify that, we will build it to a certified level.
Will it be to the silver level?
No. Well, I'll try to build it to the highest level possible. I don't know. I've gone over the points that are available, and I'm fairly certain I can get to certified. If I can get to silver, I would certainly try to get there.
The reason I ask is that in the PERC minutes, it says that it's going to be a LEED certified silver level building, and that's what they approved.
I didn't see those minutes. I'm sorry. I didn't know that's what it said.
Yeah, it does. It would be built to a LEED certified silver level, and that's what PERC approved.
Sorry, I didn't realize that was the situation. Some of those, I've studied that. It's pretty all-encompassing program, the LEED certification process, and there's a lot of things in there I'm not sure I can accomplish. Well, for one thing, you get points for reusing an old building. Well, there's no building there, so you can't get points there. There's some other things about regional planning, and I'm not certain, because I'm not certain how the reference goes, if I would be able to get points there. There's certain other things like if you build a bicycle changing room in your facility at one point, there are some things that are very, you can accomplish. There's points for buying a certain percentage of your building materials that are constructed or made within 500 miles. There again, we haven't called out a lot of these building materials yet. We could certainly try to buy materials that are made within 500 miles. I don't know where they make glass. Maybe they make it in Kansas City. I just don't know where some of this stuff's made. Everything's so regional now in terms of, they're regional centers, and that's where stuff comes from. But I would try, my statement to you would be, I'd try to achieve the highest rate possible. I'm not sure that without knowing more about some of the classifications or some of the requirements that silver is achievable. But I'm fairly certain, in fact, I'm very certain, I just said I'm going to build it to at least the certified level.
Okay. Okay. Questions of any of the other presenters? please.
I think mine is for Britt. I'm not sure, or it might be Bob. But I was reading about the TDDs, the Transportation Development District, and, you know, it says on there that transportation projects above and beyond what the city would normally require. And so for 9th and New Hampshire, we did a TDD. So why here in the very beginning did we not point the applicant to having a TDD for the parking garage? Why the NRA instead of a TDD? So that's why I'm not sure if that goes to you or to Bob.
I might be able to help answer that.
Okay.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you.
It really is a function of what the project is going to be generating, and what the potential revenue sources are as far as what an economic development tools might be applicable. So the Transportation Development District is one that uses an additional sales tax. So I don't know how much revenue that would be generated by the commercial activities at this project, but my guess would be that would be significantly less than those sales tax revenues generated by the hotel project.
Okay.
In terms of tax incentives, I think the Hobbs Taylor Lofts opened in January of '06, if I remember right, roughly. Is that, what sort of incentivization occurred with those?
I'm not aware of any incentives that were provided.
How about
I wasn't here
the
at that time.
Belisara condos? Did
I
those
don't-
receive any level of incentivization?
Not that I'm aware of.
But both of those do provide an underground parking, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, at this time, we're going to continue the public hearing. And is there a public comment on this project? This would include any comments about the neighborhood revitalization area, the industrial revenue bond financing for the mixed-use project, anything that deals with the project. And again, if we could have your name and address, that would be great.
Good evening, Commission. Ken Easthouse, 1611 East 24th Street. Before I get started, just a quick update of vital importance. At halftime, KU is winning 51-35, so if anyone was curious about that. You know, I've been following this project with great interest and enjoyed, a spirited back and forth through most of it. One thing that has stood out to me during the whole process is the need to define the affordable housing and what exactly is affordable housing. And that's something that I think all of us look forward to having in the very near future. However, when we go about fulfilling the goal of what affordable housing is, though, I can't see how this is actually affordable housing in reality. On what planet is reducing the cost of one luxury apartment fulfilling the goal of affordable housing in Lawrence? I don't know a whole lot of people who are on those wait lists for affordable housing projects that would be able to afford to move into this. That you could have a family unit living in this particular unit, particularly when there's not currently a grocery store downtown. So when we start talking about affordable housing, if that is the point and one of the goals in this project, I just don't see, I think this is lip service. And I don't see it as legitimate affordable housing initiatives for this particular project. Again, this is my opinion. You have your own goals that you have set. From my perspective, being a lower middle class individual in the community, I just don't see how this meets the goal though. The other thing I wanted to point out, thank you, Commissioner Herbert, for pointing out that has not been discussed a whole lot, the fact that the ownership of the penthouse would still go to Mr. Shum. That's a big deal in my mind as well. Also, because I like numbers, I did the math. Over the 50-year project, the differential between the two projects, it comes out to about $138,500 a year in difference between the smaller project and the bigger project. But the tax revenues for the smaller project are front-loaded, so take that into account as well. So, thank you, Commissioners.
Thanks, Ken. Other comment?
Dan Dannenberg, 2702 University Drive. I admit to knowing nothing about commercial real estate and speaking from a fairly healthy dose of simple-mindedness thrown in. This property, as I understand it, has been vacant for 26 years. There was a fire. Who owned the property at the time of the fire? What businesses were in there at the time of the fire? Was there an insurance settlement on the fire? What happened to the proceeds of that settlement, if any? There's some history here that I think is not adequately delved into. I want to sort of comment on the previous commenters' statements about affordable housing. Why in the world put one condominium in a building like this as an affordable unit? That smacks of just plain ridiculous. No affordable housing goes in there. There are other places where you can have affordable housing just a few steps away from this location, except you're dealing probably with high caste landlords who won't, they won't develop the property. They're just letting it sit there and go no place. The other question about this is the LLC will be involved in this project, will probably be exempt from state income tax. Who knows what the buffoonery in Topeka will do next, but as it is now, they won't have to pay state income tax. And like the previous gentleman mentioned, this is nothing more than a retirement home for the applicant. He will get tax-free for a period of time his personal residence, or a significantly reduced tax. And the PERC vote of 4-2, I would like to know how that breaks out, because as I understand it, the sitting mayor and a former mayor are on PERC, and the applicant is a former mayor. How did the two mayors and former mayor on PERC vote? And we hear 50 years. Who forecasts 50 years these days? I mean, years and years ago, the Ford Motor Company tried to forecast ahead 30 years. And they finally threw up their hands. They said, we can't do it. And this was way back when. I mean, this was about the time the Wright brothers were putting their airplanes in the air. Not that long ago, but long ago. And I don't know who knows what this is going to be in 10 years. You know, the commercial development at this place seems quite frankly squishy. Are there people trying to do leases or get in there now? What kind of businesses? We've heard generalizations, but we don't know. Just out of the blue the other day, I guess there's a clothing company that's going into the former kitchen store place. So we don't know what's going on in 50 years? You've got to be kidding me. 10 years maybe. But I just think that there's a lot to go, that's just not clear here. But forget affordable housing, my gosh. You know, one unit, that's like spitting in the ocean. It isn't going to turn anything around when it comes to affordable housing. And I had one other point I wanted to make, but it seems that it has slipped what passes for my brain. The parking garage, I am not a fan of underground parking, and I don't know enough about it, but it just seems very costly, and you know, you have to dig up a lot of dirt and pour a lot of concrete. Why couldn't there be another level built at the 8th and Vermont parking lot? Or some developer had their eye on that, and we can't do that? But I would say that should be considered, rather than digging down under this project, is consider another level on the 8th and Vermont lot, and then the condo owners could rent those spaces, and the developer could share with the city in the cost of that lot. But I just think there's too much here that, and one final point, then I'll shut up and sit down. Was this property during this 26 years ever put up for sale? Was there any offer to buy this property? Because 26 years for a location to go unoccupied is really a long time, it seems to me. But I don't know that much about commercial real estate. And I just think there are too many other questions that need to be answered.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
Dan, to answer your first question, it was Miller's Print Shop, and it burned down on Christmas Eve in 1990.
Okay. And who owned that?
I don't know. I think, Mr. Shum, you own the lot to the north since the 80s, right?
The ownership of that lot, there's two lots there. One is 50 feet wide and one is 45 feet wide. I owned the 45 feet to the north or adjacent to the Lucy Hobbs Taylor old dental clinic. The Lawrence house was located on that lot, and then on the other lot, Miller Print Shop. A fire broke out in Miller's Print Shop on Christmas Eve, 1990. Strong southerly winds blew the fire into my building, and they both burned down. And I received, Dan, nearly as I can recall, because it is 26 years ago, an insurance settlement of, I recall, $80,000, of which I paid off the remaining note and then had the site cleared. I don't know what the Millers did, and I just acquired the other property last year. Just for the record, I bought it from Thomas Fritzl. He does not have any kind of ownership with regards to this project. I paid more than the appraised value at the county for that piece of property. You can go down and check. It's all in Sanders and my name. So just so that everyone has the full story on that piece of property. I hope that answered all the questions. Thank you.
And Dan, just so that you know, my vote on the PERC committee was positive in favor of the project. And I believe that former Mayor Cromwell's vote was positive also. One other thing too, excuse me just a second, Dan, the applicant did have a proposal when talking about the affordable housing piece, if I remember right. You had talked about the possibility of buying a duplex or some other piece of property that could be used for affordable housing too. So that was something that was taken into consideration also.
What I did offer on that, to recollect here a little, is because at the time, all right, let me start back. 21 months ago, things were different than they are now. And as I went through this process, things got added or ideas changed. And so we've added affordable housing. Now we're talking about local labor. And those are all good things. I'm not concerned about that at all, but things did change as we moved along. So I offered then on the first visit with you to buy a duplex anywhere in the city that you said buy it over there or buy it over there, and then turn those units, a unit of those duplex into affordable housing, because I didn't know what the legal ramifications would be with trying to take a 1 unit in a 11 unit development and put it into an affordable housing. I just didn't have the information. I was ignorant of how that worked. And since then, we went to see Rebecca Buford. She said it could be done. It's been a challenge for the staff to write an agreement that includes this one kind of unique condominium space, living space. They've accomplished that, I think. Everyone feels strongly that it'll work. It can get sold into the system, and it can stay in the system, and it works fine with me. So I've tried to cooperate at all levels with what your wishes have been. So hope that explains that.
Okay. Yes, sir.
The 2 no votes were Chris Adair and me.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Hello. Excuse me. I'm Gregory Cobble, 6217 Palisades Drive here in Lawrence. I made some notes in my phone, so that's why I'm looking down. Good evening. My name, again, is Gregory Cobble. I'm a small business owner, and I've been in Lawrence now about 1.5 years. I'm a food broker by trade. For the last 20 years, I've sold primarily seafood to restaurants and supermarkets all across the country. Next week or so, I'll be taking the expensive risk of opening a seafood restaurant on Mass Street. In fact, it's a over 100-year-old building at 719 Mass. It's one of Bob's buildings. But having traveled the world and living in many different cities, I find Lawrence, in particularly downtown Lawrence, to be a really special place. And in order to keep downtown special and our small businesses open, we need people and customers. So I strongly support this project. The more density of consumers living and working downtown, will only help all of us, in downtown Lawrence. I think we all know opening and sustaining a small business is very difficult, and statistically, not many of them make it. And if you look really close on Mass, there's a lot of empty spaces. I know it's a vibrant downtown, but there's still a lot of empty spots. So the more help we can get, like this particular project downtown, to bring more people, more businesses, I think the more likely downtown Lawrence is going to be special for many years to come. So thank you.
Thanks, Gregory.
My name is Frank Jansen at 1338 New Hampshire. It'd be nice to have another Duck's restaurant downtown for seafood. The parking issue that you just talked about, I know you're doing strategic planning, and I believe you're planning to redo the downtown parking code to accommodate things like, right now you got Pachamamas, 40-some apartments with no parking there. You got the Hobbs Taylor Loft, they have parking behind the building. You have the proposed grocery store there at the Borders building, which has 2 levels of parking, one for the residents and one for the customers. I don't know whether the Shum Tower could have parking either perhaps behind it or elsewhere, but in the planning of the financial aspects of the Shum Tower, I think there needs to be some reference to the fact if you have people who want to work there but can't park there, are they going to not come there to the apartment? Or are they going to be there or not if there's no parking, if they can't find parking? We're approaching the downtown parking Armageddon here in Lawrence, and I don't know how soon you're going to get this new parking ordinance done, but you need to get it done as soon as you can. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Frank.
Hi, I'm Chris Flowers, 2628 Ridge Court. Also about the parking, does it take into consideration visitors to the residents? Or what about like delivery drivers making deliveries like food, flowers, whatever? Also, I don't think that affordable housing should be a $90,000 one unit apartment. It just doesn't seem that affordable to me. Why not just live in a trailer park? I mean, I live in a 1-bedroom unit and it's affordable, and I don't think we need this. Thank you.
Thanks, commissioners. My name is Courtney Shipley. I live at 1125 Castled. And I actually just I want to start with a question I had about, this is the first time I'd read an application or a technical report for an NRA or an IRB. That's always fun. But I did see, and this might be a question maybe for Tony or for you, and it says under the IRBs that when they've been issued, the municipality owns the underlying asset and the debt's repaid through the revenues. So one of my questions is, if the city owns the underlying asset and some damage comes to the historical monument to the north, I know you guys keep saying that you have the bonds but not the liability. Is that still the case if there's damage to another building during the process of building? Does anybody know?
Well, just go ahead and we'll get an answer to
Okay.
that, Courtney.
And City Manager Markus, the last couple times we talked about this, asked what is the public purpose you're trying to achieve by using these incentives. And as a taxpayer and a voter, I can see very little in this project that benefits a public purpose. This project in this location does not meet the state NRA requirements. As I read them, they're pretty simple. You provided them for us. The first criteria would be, are these empty lots a threat to health or safety? Nope, they're just empty. No drug deals, nothing weird. The second criteria, is there an economic need? Well, the developer himself has pointed out that similar projects still have vacancies even after 12 years. This development will only be 50% occupied the first year and will have a front-end shortfall of cash in the first year. And again, to quote the developer, vacancy is a real concern. That's a quote. The smaller office spaces may only be poaching tenants from another building, catty corner 123 West 8th nearby, which also has vacancies. So I don't see that the city needs to gamble tax dollars when there's not really a demand for that kind of space at this exact moment. More to the point, we don't need to revitalize, quote unquote, a block that's already thriving. If you guys bother to go to that block, everybody's utilizing their space except this owner. The assertion that there's not a lot of economic activity going on, that it's soft economic activity, it's just false. Everybody has a business on that block. We got Carnegie Building, Vermont Street Station, there's a dentist, an optometrist, a lawyer, those guys never go out of business, right? There's a hair salon, let me tell you something. The people that rent that have added 3 full-time skilled employees and 1.5 unskilled in the last year. They didn't ask for any incentives. They did that on their own, right? Great Harvest, they've operated for 20 years. 4 full-time employees, 2 part-time. Again, no incentives. And this is more employees than this development is proposing. As my recollection is, there is only going to be 1 part-time position created by this development. Terrebonne, you can hardly even get in that place, it's so busy. Eldridge Extended, it makes use of 2 stories. They're booked all the time with venues, as a venue with parties, and especially at Christmas. So all of the people on this street managed to employ more individuals than this development, and again, didn't ask for any tax breaks. So they're all contributing to the tax base and generating sales tax without any handouts. So the developer, the owner, the applicant, has been sitting on it for 26 years. Again, that was their choice. They could have broadened the tax base any time within the last 26 years, so I'm not clear why we're rewarding that. And the third criteria, as I was talking about earlier, is if the project preserves community or historic assets, and it doesn't. And in fact, it detracts from the national and local historic site to the north, Lucy Taylor Hobbs home, which is, maybe you guys don't know, is the first female dentist in the United States of America. Had her first business here in Lawrence. So it doesn't, it certainly doesn't preserve the unique character. It obscures it. So there's just no rationale for this project to receive an NRA to me. If I read the state criteria correctly, it's just not been met. The developer himself has stated that the project will go forward at this, location no matter what. So again, I'm not clear why the word incentive is even being used here. If you're already going to do something, why am I paying you to go ahead and do what you are going to do anyway? The tax base will still be broadened. There will still be infill development. We just won't have paid for it. And let's see here. I don't really care about housing that much. Lawrence has elected this particular commission specifically to stop rubber stamping these kinds of incentives. And they only serve an elite segment of the community, and taxpayers are sick to the teeth of it. And please vote to deny this corporate welfare. Thank you very much.
Okay. Other comment? Any other comment? Entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second to close the public hearing, made by Commissioner Vice Mayor Soden, second by Commissioner Herbert. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Tony, or Randy, I guess Tony, the question was brought up about the ownership of the underlying asset through the industrial revenue bonds. Can you answer that question? Or
Well, under these, with these industrial revenue bonds, the city will not have liability. We will not be the property owner. So if something should happen, the city will not be on the hook for those damages, just by virtue of the industrial revenue bonds.
Okay. Just making sure. Okay. Let's see, what was I going to ask? Wait, anybody got any other questions of anyone? Read again, the total value of the incentive packages is $1.285 million, right?
I believe that is correct. Let me just double check.
1.285, $306, I think it was.
$1,285,306.
Okay.
Tom's report had a different number. Tom, did your report have 1.5 as the financing gap? That's what I wrote down. That's without the NRA and IRB.
I don't know if I showed that in my report, Vice Mayor. Are you talking about the full memo and the technical?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if there's a difference, it's because, didn't you take out part of the sales tax, or?
Yeah, there's.
I was showing the total tax, whereas there's part that doesn't accrue to the city that's out of the
Okay.
city report.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the amount they put on the record tonight was $1,013,296 for property tax savings. That would be the NRA. And then $272,011 for the IRB.
So in a nutshell, I go back to the cost of this parking. I mean, it seems to me that what we're being asked to consider in this project, and I mean, you can look at it any way you want, but the incentive part of this will go to cover the underground parking of this facility. That's it, basically. I mean, we can put it any way we can or we want, but if a building's to be built there without the incentive, it will not include a parking component, I'm gonna guess, that's on that lot other than what might be on the outside of it. And the only thing that I see is that we're being asked to really incentivize what would be the underground parking portion of this deal.
Let's talk about that parking for a minute, because when you develop real estate in a world where you have to compete with products of a similar nature, right? And when you look at the comps for this property, all of them offer that parking. And so to say that, well, we can build this, you know, the original article that came out, and the story has changed since then, but the original article said, well, if I don't get the incentive, I'll build it without the parking. But that's not realistic in a real estate development world, because none of these people are going to buy $500,000 condos if they don't have a place to park their car. So if you're going to develop this as a condo, he's got to put the parking there. That's not like an addition for public good, right? That's an addition because I have to do it to make my project viable. And as we talk about the language of NRA, it specifies there has to exist a public good. And there's nothing charitable about the existence of that parking. That parking is there to make the project commercially viable. It's not a charitable public use feature. So I don't know that that's what we can go with in public good. And what that leaves us with then would be the idea of affordable housing, a single unit at $100,000. You know, when you talk to Larry McElwain and he talks about the need for affordable housing, he doesn't call it affordable housing, he calls it workforce housing. That we need to find housing in this community so that people who are laborers, the very people we're trying to bring with Venture Park, that these people have a place to live and they can live within our community, and hopefully that retains them working within our community. Workforce housing is, this is not that. You know, downtown condos are not workforce housing. So I struggle to find the public good here.
Okay. Anyone else?
You know, I'm having a hard time with this discrepancy in the project cost versus the building costs, projected costs, that $700,000 gap. When this property owner owns the property, they're essentially going to pay themselves back $700,000. It's what it sounds like anyway, $700,000. So they're going to use that as part of their down payment, I'm assuming, because that's part of the 2.2. So they're getting, another advantage there personally, which I understand land has value. Don't get me wrong, I understand that. But we're talking about the same owner, and I'm struggling with that. And he's going to have a unit on top, which is completely legal in an NRA. I understand that, but I'm just really struggling with that. And in the parking issue, he had indicated he needs 50 to 75 more than the 22 in order to satisfy the building needs. So I'm not sure how much of the parking problem he's solving with that. Some, obviously, but not. And so I'm concerned about that. And he said right up front is that it's 75% or nothing. That's what your attorney had indicated. It's 75% or nothing. And I can tell you right now, just based on some of these concerns I'm seeing, I can't go 75%. And so if it's 75% or nothing, then I guess it's, for me anyway, then it's nothing, because it didn't sound like you had any wiggle room at all, so.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think concerns that we've heard over the years about incentives have involved three things. The process, the cost to the community, and the community benefit. And we've been hearing that tonight. This commission has taken steps to essentially address the process question. And frankly, I was not elected to rubber stamp anything. And that's why we've made changes to the process. Bringing NDC in has been a really valuable addition to our process. And, you know, one of the reasons that I appreciate what Mr. Jackson's been doing is that I can ask a question and say, because a lot of people say, oh, it'll develop anyway. You know, what are we going to get if it develops anyway? And the way that we've done our analysis in the past is it's either nothing or this project. And I think the answer to that question really addresses some of what you're talking about with benefit to the community and some of what you're talking about with benefit. What we are doing, if we do this incentive, is we are investing in an enhanced revenue stream over a long period of time. I mean, that's what we're doing. Net, if you take the total, the 14 million, subtract the incentive, the net is going to be significant, maybe double what you would bring in for our community from an identified piece of property. The sustainability aspect of this, I agree with Eileen. We haven't done a good job of talking about what is the significance, what is the community benefit of infill development. I mean, if you're for transit, this project merits your support. If you're for a downtown grocery store, this project merits your support.
How does it benefit transit?
Because when you increase density, you increase the use of transit.
Do a lot of people in $500,000 condos take the T?
You know, I think a lot of people are going to be taking the T.
Okay.
And if you want to have people in $500,000 condos paying property tax, you're going to help pay for some police officers. You're going to help pay for some teachers because your revenue stream is going to be enhanced. Okay? Now, the community benefit, frankly, is optimizing the revenue stream from this particular piece of property. You're adding in some benefits of vitality, strengthening downtown. What's the cost of the community? We're going to rebate some property taxes, and we're not going to collect some sales taxes. Most of the sales taxes on the RB are actually on the state. The dollars, to me, make sense on this one. We can invest in downtown. We can invest in optimized revenue streams. The community benefits, frankly, what we've said was we want permanent, dispersed, affordable housing. Okay? Now, affordable housing is ill-defined in this community because we have not made a precise definition of this, but there's a spectrum of need that we are not addressing all ends of the spectrum. So when something goes through our advisory board with a unanimous vote saying this merits our support as affordable housing, you know, frankly, I think we have to listen to the people who are talking to us. And frankly, I think we need to listen to staff. How does this fit with our comprehensive plan? We want to do infill development. We've done a really lousy job of leading on infill development. We have. And we need to direct staff to say, this is something we need to talk about. Is this the perfect project? Probably not, okay? Perfection is hard to find in this world. I certainly haven't done it. The question is, does the project merit what the applicant is asking for in terms of incentives? I mean, he said he would build to LEED standard. He's worked with us on the affordable housing aspect. He's doing parking. You know, we get all that, and we optimize the property tax revenue stream from this property. We're not, people are owning homes downtown instead of breaking ground outside. I guess I'm a little frustrated in this because I'm frustrated with the conversation that we're having. Okay? We need to get real about environmental issues, sustainability issues, and We need to take that score from 4.5 out of 10. And frankly, this project would help us do that.
Well, I think perhaps what Matthew was kind of getting at was that internal rate of return where, and I took this from Tom's report, so if it's not exactly the same as Britt's, I'm sorry. But just as an example, the internal rate of return without any incentives is 5.78. So I don't know if that's exactly the number Britt had, but that's what Tom had. And to me, when you're living in the building, I think that your risk level should be a little lower, you know, because you're living there. So to me, I think just reducing the IRR by about 2% when you're going to live there and occupy probably most of one whole floor, I think that the project does not merit incentives in that matter. That's kind of what it comes down to me as. I'm not sure that I could, you know, my gut keeps saying to not approve it. My mind wants to, you know, for all the reasons that have been listed. As I told Bob yesterday, I think it's great that he wants to build a building there. I think that's fabulous. Whether that merits tax incentives is a whole nother deal. So that's just kind of what it comes down to me. If you're going to live there, then, I mean, any homeowner that buys a single-family home has a lower rate, lower risk value, I should say, because they're going to live there. So I think that this applies in that case. And if we were incentivizing the parking, I think we should have did a more straightforward manner and just did a TDD. And there is retail, and perhaps some of the services on the second floor could have been taxable, perhaps not. Who knows? You know, we don't know without people occupying there. And then the people that are actually using that space would be paying for the tax incentives. I think, to me, that would have been a more appropriate tax incentive to go for, but I didn't look at the numbers, so those weren't run. Those are my feelings on it.
Well, I appreciate the discussion and the questions and all the work that this commission has done. It's pretty obvious we have a little bit of a difference of opinion, but Bob, I want to thank you for the work that you and Sandra have done on this project, and at your request, we're going to have a vote on this, just so that you know where we're at. You know, I know this has not been easy on you and your family as you've gone through this, but I do want to thank you for all the work that you've done in trying to meet kind of where we've been at on running you through various areas to go forward on this. But as you know better than anybody, and it's my floor right now, so just give me that. As you know better than anybody, going through an incentive request is tough. And ultimately, the bottom line rests with a majority of this 5-member body. And that sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no. And we're going to find that out here in just a second. I think that there's a lot of great components here, but you know, you better than anybody know that there was a change based, a change to this commission based on a number of things, and maybe that was one of them a couple years ago. So, anyway,
If I may make one last comment.
I'll give you a couple
I have
seconds
worked
here.
years, and I think you know that, Mayor, to make this downtown a better place to be, to live in, for people to want to be, for tourists to say, gosh, this is a great downtown. Just a little bit of history. In 1998, Project 2000 came along, and that was going to include a hotel at 9th in New Hampshire. Well, it wasn't until 2010 or 11 that actually happened, so it was like 12 or 13 years later when it was supposed to happen right away. Bottom line is, we finally have got some stuff going that's going to help secure our downtown for the future. I haven't seen a lot of willingness by this commission to move along that same path. And I certainly hope that that's not for the long stay, because downtown doesn't stay even. It either goes up or goes down. You've got two rather significant challenges right now. Jumping the SLT on 15th Street or Bob Billings, you've got a large unit, a large development of 2,000 units that want to go in. And then on South Iowa Street, you've got a commercial development that's pulling away. If you don't take the opportunities that are there to strengthen downtown when you have a chance, I think it's foolish. I think you're going to be pulled apart, and it's going to lessen. That's just an overview. That's how I've operated over the years. I tried to add parking wherever we can. We passed a special benefit district. When I was on the commission, I urged Dave Corliss to consider that. We got the whole of downtown to beat that district, and so we were able to add another 75 or 80 spaces in that parking garage over by the library. Parking is key. It'll help us develop downtown. I just hope that when there's opportunities to see a development come through, that it'll be a meaningful development in terms of mixed-use development, that you take that opportunity. Thank you, and thank you for your time in this. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Can I make a comment?
Please.
I'm sitting here listening, and Commissioner Larsen, I'm not sure your questions have been answered yet as to what your concerns are. You seem to have a concern about Mr. Shum's project offering the property as a part of the expense of the development. And it seems to me that it's a completely legitimate part of the expense of this project. What?
Well, my concern is, my concern, or what I question, is the fact that the property is already owned by them, so it sounds to me like they're gonna take that $700,000 gonna go into their, back to them, and then they're gonna use that money for part of the down payment. That's what I'm hearing.
But if he owned property elsewhere, and he didn't own this piece of property, and he converted that other piece of property to cash to buy this piece of property, it'd be the same thing.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just having a hard time, given the fact that he's putting a unit in there for himself as part of it, and I understand that's fine. But I've been getting a lot of feedback about that from citizens, and just the benefit to the developer himself.
Well,
and the developer has also indicated he has no wiggle room on this, which kind of surprises me. If you go down to the 50% level, that only brings him down about half a percentage point in his IRR. If that is how tight his project is, I question the viability of it.
I think if you look at Hobbs Taylor Loft, which took a decade to build, there's some serious questions with viability here.
Yeah.
I thought there was another issue, though. The other issue seemed to be an issue about parking.
Yeah, the parking, because he'd indicated that he still would need 50 to 75 more parking spaces on top of the 22.
Right, and those are for the commercial uses,
Right.
which are permitted under our zoning ordinance. And if he proceeds with a project that goes with the 2 floors of commercial, he's going to end up with the same exact demand on parking that he would. So that issue seems to be a neutral.
So, yeah, it hasn't been, it's not addressed in this incentive package. The 2 levels of parking, or the 2 levels that aren't accounted for in the parking, the 50 to 75 spots, are going to be an issue regardless of whether he does this project or a different project. If he doesn't.
That's why we're doing the parking plan.
Yeah, that's what we're
So
doing.
it's a non-issue to this project.
Well, I don't.
Because
He's wanting
it has the
wanting an
same
incentive.
impact either direction.
He's wanting an incentive, though, for parking. And I realize there's some parking involved, and I think it's great that he's offering some parking.
The incentive is not for parking. The incentive is
not.
to make the project happen. I mean, the incentive is also to make the enhanced revenue stream, the enhanced property tax. I think it's our saying that it's about parking. It's about making the project happen.
Well, I think each of us have to determine what's the public good for
That's right.
ourselves.
And if I confused you, I'm sorry, but the thing that happened was I was the one that tied the parking to the amount of the total value of the incentive package, because they're almost identical, so.
So
That's what I did.
I just want to conclude, I support this project,
Okay.
okay? And the manager could sit here and be neutral and stay out of the weeds on these projects. I support this project. I think it makes sense. It's the reason we brought NDC in here, not to get the project approved, but to go through the metrics and make these decisions metric-based, not politic-based. And I'm hearing that you are having a lot of pressure from that regard. I've heard the comments that some of you were elected on the issue of not creating incentives. That's why we went to a metric-based analysis about how we do these projects. And I know that's a difficult thing. Public purpose could in fact include the parking, because otherwise you may be in a position at some point building public parking someplace else as well for future development here. If it was an apartment project and it didn't have parking, what would the persons do that parked there? And the whole idea behind infusing affordable housing into some of these projects is obviously this is a, it's one unit. I get that. At the same time, you have your affordable housing group trying to determine what is the definition of affordable housing. And affordable housing has a wide range. And quite frankly, the more difficult part of providing affordable housing is at the lower income levels. And we're going to have to actually incentivize more on those types of projects. So from my standpoint, this was a start. This was an idea to start infusing affordable housing into these types of projects across the entire downtown and other parts of this community. And it was to create scattered site affordable housing and put it in buildings that weren't identified as the place where it's all affordable housing, which creates a stigma. So scatter siting this housing is actually better, in my opinion, for the tenant or whoever. If they're going to be ownership units, it's better for them, rather than building concentrations of housing. And what's going to happen in this community, because I've seen it happen in other places I've worked, other places I've visited, the affordable housing is going to continue to go where the land is cheapest. And you're going to have an over-concentration of affordable housing in those areas. Granted, this is a drop in the bucket, but it's infusing housing, affordable housing, into parts of your community that would otherwise probably not get affordable housing. So yeah, I'm passionate about this, and it's just a start. And you can grow the percentage as this works. Mr. Shum's bought into this. I wasn't convinced he would. And yeah, you can poo-poo this, but this is going to provide a housing opportunity for somebody that otherwise wouldn't be able to get in that building. And what a nice thing for that person or that family that gets that opportunity.
The Public Incentive Advisory Committee also worked with our staff on coming up with a plan to identify the necessary number of units in a facility like this. Wasn't that right?
That's right.
And started out, there was quite a list, or quite a number that was placed on what would be an appropriate number, and the advisory committee and staff worked to a compromise, to what the beginning numbers should be, and that's how this came about. It came about also. So. Along with Gregory as somebody that's a downtown business owner, these projects are good for not only new businesses, but they're also good for us old businesses downtown too, because they do provide that sense of neighborhood that's there. For new customer base and everything that goes along with it. It's tough right now. You look and see there are some empty spaces in downtown. And is this the right project? Is this one that the public buy into? I'm sure I'll hear tomorrow. But, the truth of the matter is that we've been working for a long time to get downtown to grow up, to invest in it. I think, and my particular feeling is that this project probably deserves our support. Matt, I do appreciate you bringing me up to date on the parking requirement, though. On the parking and the mechanics, the way it works there, the financial part of the deal there. Okay, anything else?
I would just ask one more time for Mr. Shum if he'd be willing to accept anything less 50%.
You know, I sat here a month ago or so and listened to the Williams case, and their situation, of course, appeared to me to be quite different than mine. They had a high 9 IRR, as I recall, and taking him to 50% only reduced it by half a percentage point or so?
No, 0.87.
0.87, okay.
Yeah.
So he's still above 9, was still above 9 or right at 9?
Right at just a little over 9.
And that's the difference between that project and my project. I mean, if I was in, up mid-9s or something, I could probably stand it. But it is pretty slim. It is pretty tight. And when you, Commissioner Soden, you were talking about there won't be much risk because you live there. Well, that's usually the case when, like, you own a duplex and you live in one half of it, you can keep your eye on the other half. The risk here we're talking about is how many commercial leases am I going to be able to sign in the time necessary to make the payments? What's the vacancy rate going to be? What's the turnover rate going to be? It's not the home ownership rate or the fact that there's going to be risk with that. I'm not too worried about condo owners and their ability to make their own payments and things. What I'm really concerned about, though, is the vacancy rates on offices and the vacancy rates on commercial. And what if we have one of those rip-roaring recessions again? That puts the dent in everything, and I don't think Mr. Jackson has a recession figured into any of his numbers. Probably you're going to see a recession sometime in the next 10 years. I mean, I'm guessing that's going to happen. I hope not, but I'm guessing it's going to happen. So that's the risk factor that we're talking about in terms of when it gets down to 5% or 4%, it's just not an intelligent decision to do that. I mean, I just turned 70 the other day. I'm not going to risk everything I own based on the fact that I think that the world's going to be rosy forever. It's not. So when you get down below the 8% level and asking to negotiate that down further, I simply can't do it. It wouldn't be a good position for me. It just wouldn't. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it for my family or my wife. So I'd like to be. Mayor knows I was one of the big compromisers all the time on the commission. Try to find middle ground to where you move forward. Unfortunately, there just isn't any middle ground. The other point I'd like to make too is I didn't come up with the 75% 10 years. Your consultant did. He's the one who crunched all these numbers from all these reports and said, this is what on national level of metrics of things that fall into place, this is where it falls and this is what it should be, and these are the things that need to happen in order for this to move forward. And so I put a lot of trust in his numbers. He worked the heck out of me, and it's very, very thorough. I'm sure that nothing got missed. So I'm sorry, that's a long answer to your question, but that's the reasoning that I have in order to make that decision. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. The item before us then is to receive the request from Vermont LLC for an NRA and IRB financing for a mixed-use project at 800-815 Vermont Street for the Vermont Street project, and recommendations from the Public Incentive Review Committee and Affordable Housing Board. We have conducted the public hearing. We have closed the public hearing. The items before us are to adopt on first reading. Ordinance number 9303, establishing the revitalization area and approving the NRA plan, and then to adopt resolution number 7173, authorizing IRB financing. So the first item then, I would entertain a motion on one way or another on ordinance number 9303.
Move to approve.
Second. Any other questions or comments? A motion made in second to adopt on first reading ordinance number 9303, establishing the revitalization area and approving the NRA plan. It's made by Commissioner Boley, second by Mayor Amix. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Item is not approved. It loses 2-3. Commissioner Boley and Mayor Amix voting in approval, and Commissioners Larsen, Vice Mayor Soden, and Commissioner Herbert in opposition. And then the final item is I'd entertain a motion for adoption of resolution number 7173.
So moved.
Second. Motion made and second to adopt resolution number 7173, made by Commissioner Boley, second by Mayor Amix. This is the authorizing IRB financing for the project. Any other questions or comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Loses 2-3. Again, Commissioner Boley, Mayor Amix in approval, and Commissioner Larsen, Vice Mayor Soden, and Commissioner Herbert in opposition. Thank you all very much. Bob, again, thank you. Staff, thank you for all the work that you've done on this item. Tom, thank you. Next item is to consider approving the 2017 City of Lawrence Legislative Priority Statement. Okay. Diane, just a minute. Let's wait till everybody leaves.
Good evening. This item is your annual consideration of the state legislative program. And this document in front of you is very similar to the program for this year. But I did want to highlight a couple of additions that we included. One is a statement related to supporting the University of Kansas and Haskell Indian Nations University on their legislative issues and agendas. And then the other item is under transportation category, and that would be the identification of funding for the west leg of K-10 expansion. As you know, the design has been discussed, but there has not been any funding, and that could be something that we want to encourage the state to identify. So those are the items in this year's proposed statement, and we would be happy to include any additional items that you all would so direct for this year's statement. And then what we typically do is make sure that our legislative delegation receives a copy of this information.
Okay.
Be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions, Diane?
I just really like the addition of especially supporting the Haskell initiatives, you know, that could have a really large economic impact on our city. So I very much appreciate that addition.
Anyone else? Diane, we have, we've had discussion over the last couple of years about, guns coming into city-owned buildings. Obviously, we've had the discussion that we had this summer with the library building and, and a lot of the concern that goes on there. Do we need to make a stronger statement? Do we need to make some kind of stronger statement about revisiting that, or give us the extension, or giving us help and paying for some of the things that we're going to have to pay for to, do some of these buildings, or maybe I don't understand it.
I know there is this provision here, and I don't know if Tony might want to comment a little further. We did include this language in, but I believe that this is the similar language to this year's statement. Tony?
Yes, that's correct. There are cities that are requesting that law be revisited in its entirety, and I think the city could join in that effort if you felt strongly about it. I'm not sure, if it will be successful, but you can certainly ask. So if you want us to rewrite that a bit.
If it's just my usual hot air, I mean, that's one thing, but I just, I know that there's a lot of concern in our community about this, and as, you know, there should be, obviously, in the university community also, so.
Yeah, to accomplish it, I think we have almost 50 different venues. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a very expensive proposition to put it in one or two, let alone all of them. And then how do you start to pick and choose which buildings it goes into? If you just pass the, the motion and include us enhancing that, we'll take care of that.
Okay.
To include that provision.
Okay. I think it's something that we ought to do. Okay. Anything else on that?
No, I think the list looks really good.
A standard line, do no harm, right? Public comment on this item? Yeah.
Dan Vandenberg, 2702 University Drive. I just urge the city to do whatever it can to prohibit firearms in all city buildings. There's no place for a firearm in this room or any place else in a city building. And use whatever influence you have to persuade the legislature to enact laws that permanently put that ban in place, because it needs to happen. The last thing we need is more firearms drifting around.
Thank you, Dan. Any other comment? Okay. Well, I would suggest that we direct staff to go ahead and print our legislative priority statement, and also to enhance the area about guns in city buildings and any help that can be given there, okay? So I'd entertain a motion to direct staff to do all that.
So moved.
Motion made and seconded to direct staff to print the legislative priority statement and also to include enhancing the gun part of the deal. It's made by Commissioner Herbert, second by Commissioner Larsen. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes 5-0. Commission items.
Yeah, really briefly, I know the Lawrence School Board released this publicly as well, but I wanted to bring a little more public attention to it here. And I'm happy to pass along this Excel spreadsheet I have to Megan or anybody else in communications to make it publicly available on the city site. But Lawrence School District just publicly released our graduation rates from last year in comparison with, comparison schools, Shawnee Mission North, Olathe North, Shawnee Mission East, so on and so forth. And I think there's a whole lot to celebrate on that list. The Excel spreadsheet breaks it down demographically. Both Lawrence High and Free State had over 90% graduation rates, but when you look at the broken down demographics, it gets even better. We're talking about 93% graduation rate among African Americans at Lawrence High, 95% graduation rate among students that receive special ed services, female students that receive special ed services at Lawrence High. Just across the board, we not only compare with districts for schools around the state, but on almost every category, we're substantially above average. So I think there's a lot to be celebrated there for both Lawrence High and Free State High School. So I'm happy to do whatever it takes to make this publicly available so people can see what I'm looking at here.
Okay. Make sure that you pass along our congratulations to everybody, okay? Okay, any other commission items? City managers report. Tom?
We have a whole raft of items tonight. We'll start with the visit from the high school students. You accommodated them after the communication, and so we'll be working on that issue. You recall that Ted Boyle from the North Lawrence Improvement Association came over. Our staff did contact Ottawa Co-op and did get some level of accommodation regarding the running of the fans and the operation over at the grain elevators.
That sounds like it'll take the time that thing's running down quite a bit, won't it?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
I as a percentage, I'd have to calculate what it is, but
Yeah.
and I think the neighborhood is still irritated by the operation when it does occur, but they were, I think, somewhat, the company was somewhat accommodating in trying to work with us. And we'll obviously get ahead of it next year before that season starts. City student dinner hosted by Haskell Indian Nation University. Anna Bullinger is here. If you want to just make a couple of comments, maybe you can do it from right there.
So it was actually. So this was actually a little while ago, but, well, not a little while, probably like a month, but it was kind of the first of this type of dinner. I know everyone was really impressed with it. Haskell loved hosting it. I know Mayor and Vice Mayor were there. They hosted it, they provided the food, and it got all of us on the campus, which I think was like a big step for some of the KU senators to kind of experience that. And there were a lot of conversations. I know one of the big conversations that was held was even with our policies, that we start supporting one another, that we start supporting the needs of Haskell, even looking at a federal and state level, and we look at what KU's, because some of the things are affecting us both ways, like the concealed carry, the gun laws, that is very much affecting the University of Kansas just as much, and it's been a really big struggle. So you kind of see those overlaps within the both of them. So I know we're going to have at least 2 more of these before the end of this school year. So it was just really good. I think it was a good first step. And then even at the Tom Markus listening post, we had KU senators there, we had Haskell senators there talking to Tom. So I also think that was a good step on improving that. So
Thanks, Anna.
Anna, thank you for that.
In follow-up to the mayor's earlier comments at the opening of the meeting, the Public Works crew actually did a dry run on our snow routes, so they should be all set to go. And a reminder, sidewalks are the responsibility of the adjacent neighbors, and they're to be cleared within 48 hours after an event. And that's one of those things in terms of neighborhoods that's really critical to get that off, so you don't build up ice on the sidewalks and cause other concerns for your neighbors. Upcoming HUD fair housing reporting requirements for federal grantees. They've launched a new tool. It's called the Assessment for Fair Housing. And communities who receive federal funding, like Lawrence, are required to complete this assessment. The next consolidated plan start date is August 1st of 2018, which means the assessment for the city is due to HUD no later than November 1st, 2017. And we have a number of departments and divisions working on that on behalf of the city. We've attached, and I'm not going to go into the details, the Planning and Development Services monthly report, the September monthly building report, November sales tax reports, October financial reports, and the Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical monthly activity report. A little bit of an update on Fire Station 1. We're going to temporarily relocate the senior center to the Peasley Center, and I think they've worked out a lease arrangement, which is kind of good for all the way around. Helps Peasley and, you know, and gets the seniors into a nice facility during the construction. And the fire chief has determined that he's going to keep his operations right there at the site. He's going to kind of encroach into the right-of-way. He'll probably put a mobile kind of housing unit there to accommodate 4 officers. And I think the ambulance is going to be located at the old station on Massachusetts. So they've kind of got that all worked out. We met with Bob Sander today, but we have attached a Junior Olympic update. I've asked him to increase the frequency of these updates as we get closer and closer to the Junior Olympics. We had a very candid conversation about the contract for services and the funding that we will provide, and I think we've come to a satisfactory conclusion, but I guess it all comes down to the details. And so we intend to have an agreement between us and the Lawrence Sports Corporation for our funding portion of the Junior Olympics, and then we'll try and get that on the 20th of this month. So you'll be able to see that. The Bioscience and Tech Business Center metrics, BTPC reports the creation of a total of 219 direct jobs, 138 indirect jobs, for a total of 364 jobs with an annual payroll of $21 million. For 17, BTPC will focus on two strategies to achieve continued growth and expansion, and generating and assisting startup companies and recruiting private industry to Lawrence, Douglas County, and KU. You also have a copy of the potable water production report, which is attached. And we're working on a massage ordinance update. We continue to work on an ordinance regulating massage therapy in Lawrence. In October, staff sent letters to 44 massage businesses in town. Staff met with approximately 30 of these local massage therapists and body workers to explain the absence of state law and on the topic and importance of having a local ordinance in place. Obviously, human trafficking is an issue, and that is part of the reason for this discussion. Attendees at the meeting agreed to meet amongst themselves to review our ordinance and proposed language for staff to consider adding to the proposed ordinance. We expect to come back to the City Commission early next year with a proposed draft of this ordinance. So wanted to update you on that. And both Leslie and I went to the National League of Cities Conference in Pittsburgh. For those that have not been to Pittsburgh, it's a fascinating place. They're doing all sorts of interesting things in Pittsburgh. They have 3 universities there. Carnegie Mellon is my understanding it has the first doctorate degree in robotics in the country. And a number of their students are working with Uber and Google, and you can literally, and this is ahead of what most people in my understanding know, is you can go on Uber, and if you go on Uber XL, you could likely get an autonomous vehicle to show up and pick you up and take you around the community. So if we think that autonomous driverless vehicles are not going to happen in this country, Pittsburgh would likely tell you otherwise about some of the advances that they're making. And they kind of look, you see these vehicles, and they have this old Batman kind of contraption on the Batmobile on top of their vehicles, and it's all the sensors telling them all of the information that they're reading. So that's a pretty fascinating story. And for Pittsburgh, which is a city of about 300,000+, when you go into this city and you look at their skyline looks way more significant than a city you'd expect of 300,000. And it's in part because it's at, the juncture of 3 major rivers, and those river valleys carve out a lot of space. So space is at a very high premium in Pittsburgh, and so what you see is a lot more verticality in development rather than, the ability to just keep spreading out. So it's a fascinating place to visit. I thought a number of the seminars were exceptionally well done. Terry Bradshaw was one of the speakers, and he's kind of a hoot, but he had a pretty strong message as well. So I think NLC is a worthwhile event, and in the future I'd encourage other commissioners to join in and attend some of those conferences. So.
Very good. Questions on any of the city manager's report?
I have been getting a lot of calls on this massage ordinance situation, so from various members.
Well, there's been a lot of engagement back and forth, and I'm sure by the time it gets to the commission, there'll be a lot more engagement back and forth between the commission and the public.
Yeah, the first one I got, I was like, massage? Then I realized what it was.
Is that something the state can't do something about?
Well, yes, I imagine the state could preempt us in that regard and license in that fashion, but I suspect that it probably wouldn't cover all entities, and therefore you'd have this home rule where some could, do a little something different. But some of those types of things would probably, especially if your objective in part is to block human trafficking through some of these less than reputable operations that exist. Hopefully, everybody's every place else except Lawrence.
Well, somebody who's regulated by the state,
Yeah.
you know, and, you know, personal
Well,
service
because
business, I assumed that they would have their hands on that one too.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, that's a bad
No pun
choice.
intended. No pun intended.
That didn't come out right. Okay. Any other questions, the city manager? Okay, sorry. Calendar,
We needed to clear up January 9th and 10th. If both of those meetings are at 5:45, or if we're having the 9th instead of the 10th, or what we need to put on our calendar.
Yeah, if you click on the meetings list, the 10th doesn't exist. But it does exist on the tiny
Yeah, it's
the
highlighted
tiny
here.
calendar that's down below.
Yeah, I apologize about that. I think, I don't know why that's bolded on the 10th. The intention is for that meeting to be a meeting on the 9th, which would be in accordance with the code language that you all passed about the election of the mayor, and that would be the.
and we had to do the Monday meeting again because of this
think
new
it's a
state law.
state law, yes.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Right.
Okay, so there's no meeting on the 10th.
Correct.
Okay.
And we will make sure that that gets
Okay.
reflected.
And that's at 5:45.
The Monday meeting on the 9th is at 5:45.
We could do it 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Got it.
The calendar on the city website says it's at 4:45.
We will also
Might
fine.
check that.
double
That's
check
fine.
that. Thank you.
I mean, yeah, that'd be fine with me.
Mike's ready to move that up. All right, 5:45, January 9th.
Dress nice.
Mayor, if I might, on your work session agenda for next week,
Uh-huh.
one of the things we wanted to see is if you may be willing to have that meeting at 4 p.m. There are 2 agenda items that are on the agenda. One is a Whitewater project update from the state of Kansas officials at Wildlife Parks and Tourism about a proposed development at Clinton Lake. And we were wanting to propose that that be a 4 o'clock item, that you have a brief break in between, and then can start your regular consent agenda and the item about police oversight at 5:45, if that would be agreeable.
Is that okay with everybody?
That's fine.
4 o'clock next week?
And that's for the
The work,
13th, right?
the work session.
The
on
13th, yes.
And we're doing
Yeah.
Whitewater first.
You available to that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and advertise that meeting beginning at 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Very good, thank you.
Uh-huh.
And we're doing Whitewater first.
Right,
Yes.
okay. Any other calendar items then? No place we're gonna be where everybody's gonna be at? Okay. If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Motion made and second to adjourn, made by Vice Mayor Soden, second by Commissioner Herbert. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all.